Why hello everybody, let's try and give this iceberg thing another go. I said at the end of my last Xbox 360 Collecting Iceberg video that I would start working on either a sequel or top-ups to each of the tiers. Well, I've gone down that full-on sequel route. This won't contain anything as crazy as the last video, but there's still some obscure games on this that you might not know about, which is likely with the size of the library on this beast of a console. As with before, we'll start with the more common titles, and the longer the video goes on, the more obscure the games will become. I also have to reiterate that I am from the UK, so most of this information is based on my experiences in this country, and if I mention any prices, it will be in pounds. Since this has been done after the 360 store shut down, and there's been a boom in the prices of the games, some of these titles may sound rarer than they actually are if you're just basing it on price alone. Some of the games I mentioned last time have almost quadrupled in price over just a few months. I'd like to believe this is just a minor blip on the Xbox 360 collecting journey, and that the prices will come back down and normalise at some point. I want game collecting to be a hobby for all, and not just the people who can afford it. The names of each tier have had a little bit of a tweaking too, better to fit this selection of games. Unlike the last video, let's just go straight into the first tier, the casual player level. This is where we will talk about the games everybody knows about, as they've been littering the shelves of second-hand stores for years, and for dirt cheap at that. Up first is one of the Xbox exclusive franchises I left off with the last video, the Project Gotham Racing series. Starting out on the original Xbox, the Project Gotham series was the spiritual successor to MSR, or Metropolis Street Racer, on the Sega Dreamcast. The OG Xbox had the first two entries in the series, with 1 and 2, while the 360 got the last two, in 3 and 4. Sadly, the developers Bizarre Creations went under, so the franchise stopped on the 360. I believe Microsoft still owns the IP, so I'm still holding out just for a small chance of a resurrection one day. For a launch title on the console, PGR3 was packed full of content and wasn't an easy game to master. For context, it's one of my proudest 1000G completions. It took me about 10 years of off and on attempting the platinum medal runs. Sadly, some of the online components are no longer available, so it's not one for achievement completionists anymore, but it's still good fun. The game is touted as being a simulation racer, but compared to some of the games coming out these days, it feels more like a simcade game. This is made more apparent by the use of the kudos system, where every action during a race is awarded points. This causes a lot of the game to feel more high score focused rather than pure racing. I'm looking at you, drift events. For a fun bit of trivia, you can actually play demo versions of a couple of the Geometry Wars games when in the garage, which was a nice touch. Well, it made me buy the full versions anyway. The follow-up, Project Gotham Racing 4, came with plenty of new features, such as weather effects and the ability to race motorcycles. In all honesty, it's just more of the same, but I would say this one is more accessible to new players. Sadly again, some of the online components for this have been discontinued, and the DLC has been removed from the store, so if you're an achievement hunter, this one again isn't possible to hit that sweet 100% in. This game also felt like it had a larger push for the online modes over PGR3. If you were to buy one of these though, I would suggest going with 4, but they're both dirt cheap. PGR3 will only run you £1 in CEX these days, and 4 has doubled, coming in at only 2. As a bonus, if you want to play the earlier games in the series, they're both backwards compatible on the Xbox 360, but apparently they come with a few issues, such as frame drops and some rendering issues. I haven't tried this though myself, so I cannot confirm the severity of the issues. Sadly, none of these games are compatible on the newer systems, so the series did truly die on the Xbox 360. If you were big into the original Xbox, you most likely wouldn't have ever guessed that one of its launch titles for the follow-up console would have been a prequel to the N64 classic Perfect Dark, called Perfect Dark Zero. This game had some pretty big shoes to fill coming off the success of its predecessor, and sadly, it didn't deliver. It was a pretty game for the time, and it showed off the system, but its gameplay wasn't a scratch on what came before. The smooth controls were replaced with some janky third-person cover combat, and very, very stiff controls. I will say though, I had fun with this at launch, mostly in the multiplayer as it could be played with humans or bots. Sadly, a lot of the achievements were also tied to the multiplayer, and these were a massive grind. It was mostly for doing things thousands of times. I did actually get all the multiplayer achievements done on this, but I'm missing some of the single player ones. Most of these require beating the game on Dark Agent. These have remained unachieved simply because you have to complete the difficulty before to advance to the next. And I got all the way to the highest difficulty in the game, and decided to wipe my single player progress. And I just can't bring myself to do it again. If anyone wants to do it in co-op though, let me know. You may also be wondering how this game even came into existence. Well, during the GameCube era, Microsoft purchased Rare, the studio behind most of the classic games on Nintendo's platforms. You would have imagined this to be a win for Microsoft, but I'm not sure what happened. After Microsoft's acquisition, all the creativity seemed to be sucked straight out of the company. Yes, some of the games put on the 360 were fun, like Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts, and Viva Pinata, but they weren't what people wanted. Soon after, they were relegated to creating nothing but shovelware for the Kinect. It's only in recent years that they've had another hit with Sea of Thieves, which I have tried, but it isn't for me. I'm not a big fan of any of these types of live service games. If you want to try out this blunder on Rare's track record, you're in luck, as it'll only set you back £1.50 in CEX. Strangely, the Steelbook will cost you £8, but I swear there are more of these than the standard game in existence. It's all I ever see. The game is also backwards compatible with newer systems, as it's included in the Rare Replay collection, available on the Xbox One. Up next is a series with countless entries on almost everything imaginable, and even a reboot on newer systems. But it's hard to believe that the series started off as a console exclusive for the Xbox 360. It began life as a simple GTA clone, and a good one at that. It still held some of its humour, but nothing like the series would evolve into. What do I mean by this? Well, over the years the games got more and more outlandish, ending up with superpowers, and even battling your way out of hell. For many, this got a bit too far-fetched, so they decided to reboot the series in 2022. But sadly, that didn't seem to go down too well, as they changed up a lot of what gave the series its charm before it went full-on wacky. I believe the sweet spot was Saints Row 3. It was absurd and edgy at times, but it was still a solid title in the crime genre. But this is just personal preference. On the Xbox 360 alone, there are 5 games available. They are Saints Row 2, Saints Row 3, Saints Row 4, and Saints Row Gat Out of Hell, a play on Bat Out of Hell of course. Most of these will run you between £1.50 and £5 at CEX. But sadly, with the store shut down, Get Out of Hell will now run you around £15, which is a bit much for a glorified DLC pack. This has come down though. When I originally wrote this script, it was at £22. Other releases of Saints Row 4 and later systems actually include Get Out of Hell as a free bonus, so that might be a better option. I would be shocked if someone hadn't heard of this franchise before, to be honest. It was one of the big guns from THQ and Volition. Although there are better ways to enjoy these games today, it's still a cheap route to go down, and they're even backwards compatible on the newer Xbox systems. Crackdown was another early title released for the system. This one actually launched to good sales, but that might have something to do with the fact that it came bundled with a code to access the Halo 3 multiplayer beta. The game is an open world sandbox where you play as a biologically enhanced enforcement agent, and are simply tasked with taking down the many gangs plaguing the fictional Pacific City. So pretty much the complete opposite of the last game we spoke about, Saints Row. Where this differs is the more you play, the more powerful you become. You start being able to jump higher than buildings, pick up heavier objects such as cars, and start being able to move at super speeds. Come to think of it, a bit like what Saints Row became. Right, let's stop with the comparisons to Saints Row, shall we? The game itself isn't heavy on plot, but there is a few twists. But it's more like you're just playing a chaos simulator. You can take out the gangs in any order you like, but your current agent level will make some easier than others. Being a sandbox, you can drive vehicles, but I found this was only used for many of the checkpoint races throughout the city, because you will soon find that you can outrun any of the cars with ease. Due to this, the game also contains agility races, which are checkpoint based, but it will involve you sprinting and jumping up skyscrapers within a time limit. I actually had a blast with this game, and I would recommend it to anyone who's looking for a bit of dumb fun. Of course it hasn't aged the best, but it has got 2 sequels, Crackdown 2 on the 360 and Crackdown 3 on the Xbox One. I did play 2, but it didn't grab me the same. They added a more zombie breakout theme to it, and at that time it just seemed to be in every game and it felt a bit stale. I imagine if I went back to it now, I would find it a lot more enjoyable. Crackdown 3 on the other hand, I've yet to play. It is part of Game Pass and it's dirt cheap physically, but I cannot comment on its quality. If you want to pick up the 360 games, they will only run you £1 each in CEX at the time of writing. And if you want to make a jump to the later gen offering, that's only a measly £2.50. Again though, being first party Microsoft titles, you do not need an Xbox 360 to play both of these older titles. They're both backwards compatible with the newer devices. During the 7th generation of gaming, there seemed to be a bit of a boom in the Toys to Life category of gaming. The 2 big players were Disney Infinity and Skylanders. LEGO also threw their hat into the ring with LEGO Dimensions, but I honestly believe most people were buying these just because they were cool LEGO kits rather than playing the game too much. I could be wrong though, I just know people who bought them and don't even own the game. Nintendo had their line of amiibos, but these were more like figures with the digital key to unlock extras in a game, apart from when they were used in Smash Brothers. Again, most people I know who collect amiibos is because they look cool to display rather than use them. But when it comes to Skylanders and Disney Infinity, the figures are an integral part of the game. They were in LEGO too, but we'll skip past that. I have enough to talk about in this video already. Without the figures you couldn't play. You had to pop your character onto a base, and the character would then appear in the game. With Skylanders, this base was known as a portal, and in Disney Infinity, I believe it was just a base. I haven't played too many of these, but I have beat the first Skylanders and played a good chunk of Giants. Skylanders play like top-down adventure games where different sections of the game are locked off behind doors for specific elemental characters. You're given enough characters in the starter pack to see the end of the game, but you won't see everything unless you get out there and buy more characters. Get them kids spending. Using the base characters alone does make the game difficult, as each time your character dies, you have to place another one on the portal. So the more figures you have, the easier the game is. If you run out of characters, you have to start the level again. So it's not all doom and gloom, but it's a cheap way to make people go out and empty their wallets for a smoother experience. What is cool though is each character does actually save its stats to the figure. So if you pick these up second hand, you could be getting some very powerful characters. But this might take some of the fun out of the game, as you didn't level them up yourself. Luckily, a lot of the figures are really cheap now, but if you want to go for a full set, there's some in there that go into the hundreds of pounds to pick up. There was a good number of games released on the 360 in the Skylanders franchise. These were Skylanders Spyro's Adventure, Skylanders Giants, Skylanders Swap Force, Skylanders Trap Team, Skylanders Superchargers, and Skylanders Imaginators. Sadly, I believe most of these require different portals, so it's not just buy a base set and be able to play them all. Strangely, the later games in the franchise got releases on the Xbox One, and these can cost you a pretty penny these days. Saying that, the starter packs for the later games on the 360 will still run you around £50. The earlier games can be found between £10 and £15 easily, but don't jump on them. I've also found out they're common car boot fodder, so you can get into these way cheaper if you're patient. I must quickly add that this game started as an entry to the Spyro franchise, but I think it was mugged off rather quickly, and he just became another character in the game. Disney Infinity, on the other hand, I think is more of an interactive toy box, like an expanded version of the toy box from the Toy Story 3 game, so you spend all your time building up a world of which you can do whatever you want in. I believe the character figures do actually allow you to play as them, but they also add extra cosmetics to the world as well. They also unlock character-specific challenge levels. I do have these games, so I really should give them a go, as they look like they could actually be a good bit of fun, and that way I'll be able to give you a bit more of a detailed description. But I couldn't talk about a Toys to Life section without giving them a mention. There are 3 Disney Infinity games in the series: Disney Infinity, Disney Infinity 2.0, and Disney Infinity 3.0. I believe these are more content updates rather than full releases. Different characters were added for each release. For example, 2.0 added Marvel characters and 3.0 added Star Wars characters. So you have to make sure you have the correct characters for the correct game. I imagine this would have been one of the downfalls for the series, as keeping track of everything could have been a nightmare for parents. Skylanders also have characters which only worked in certain releases, but they're a little easier to work out. For example, big giant figures are going to work in the game called Giants. Due to all the toys and the different games available, I can't give too much of a pricing guide for them, but I would suggest picking up these whenever you see them, just in case you find one that's got a bit of value. Also, I did have fun with the Skylanders games I played. The LEGO Dimension sets are most likely the ones you want to pick up if you find them out and about for cheap though, but everybody knows about hoovering up LEGO if you see it cheap. It seems every console these days needs some kind of karaoke game. There are many different third-party ones on all systems, and Sony dominate this genre with their SingStar games, but during this generation, Microsoft had a stab at it. At the time, most console microphones were wired. Lips went for a wireless motion-sensitive option. The idea behind the motion sensing was people could drop in and out by just picking up or putting down the microphone. You could also shake it or tap it along to the beat to add noises such as tambourines to the tracks. You could also connect a Zune. Remember them things? An iPod or a USB flash drive to the game to sing along to your very own tracks. I never tried to do this, so no idea how well it worked. Well, I don't remember ever trying it. Should check if there are any achievements tied to it. As if there were, I must have. It supported paid downloads as well through their own in-game track store. Although this is now closed down, there were a few add-on packs released with other songs, which also worked as standalone titles. There were 6 games released in the series overall. This might sound odd if you think you've played them all, but there were 2 specific to certain countries. I'm going to butcher this. Lips Canta el Español was released in Spanish-speaking territories, and included songs in Spanish, and Lips Deutsch Partynaller was obviously German. I believe these aren't recognised by the Xbox as a new game. They're just standard versions of the games or add-on discs with the languages changed and a couple of different tracks. But if you're going for that full set, you're going to need them. The mainline ones released in the English-speaking world were Lips, Lips Number 1 Hits, Lips Party Classics, and Lips I Love the 80s. To be honest, if you're into this type of game, I can imagine we get a good amount of enjoyment out of it. None of the base games will run you more than a couple of pounds at CEX, and even including the microphones, you're still looking at under a £5. I remember the microphones being a bit strange to sync to the console, but when they were up and running, they were fine. Sadly, they require batteries and are not rechargeable. If you want the other 2 games, your only choice will be Amazon or eBay, and they will run you a bit of a premium, about £20 plus import from their respective countries into the UK, which might be more difficult now. As you can guess, since they use a peripheral, these are not backwards compatible. I'm also going to have to add, Lips is a horrible name for a game. This is so low down on the list from my own personal experience. No matter what bundle of games I pick up, whatever second-hand shop I look through, and countless charity shops, there always seems to be a copy of one of the games from this series. That's the Operation Flashpoint series. The games didn't start on the 360, I believe it was on PC and the original Xbox to start with, but the 360 got 2 entries in this hardcore first-person military shooter franchise. The main gimmick of the game was realism. If you're spotted, you're pretty much done for. All the levels are played out on large open maps and can be played with friends, which is highly recommended. You will spend a lot of time sneaking about at a snail's pace, so I guess it's good to have people to talk to when you're playing these. I know people who really got into these back in the day. I'm going to have to say I didn't. They took too much patience for me, and I couldn't be bothered to put the time in. There were 2 releases on the console. These were Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising and Operation Flashpoint Red River. I imagine my location in the world has something to do with why I see these so often. They're developed by Codemasters, and they happen to be a British developer, so I imagine their games just get a bit more of a push over here. Now they're under the EA umbrella, so that might not be the case for future releases. Again, both of these are dirt cheap, the first costing just £1 in CEX, and Red River, the follow-up, being £1.50. If you're into hardcore military sims, these might be for you. Just don't go into these thinking if you're good at Call of Duty you'll be fine. These are a different beast. And if you are wondering, yes, they're backwards compatible. With the amount of games, spin-offs and even a movie, it's crazy to think that Borderlands as a franchise only started in this generation. It graced the Xbox 360 in 2009 and instantly became a hit, solidifying the looter-shooter genre into the gaming landscape. It wasn't the first game of its type, but it was the one that really got people's attention. Gameplay boils down to an open-world first-person shooter experience with light RPG mechanics of stat upgrades. But the main gameplay tweaks come from the countless number of guns and modifications you can pick up to improve your character. This isn't a game where you should really find a favourite gun and stick with it, as there's always something better. Along with this insane level of gun customization, the world is full of bizarre and entertaining characters, as well as a cel-shaded aesthetic which made it stand out against all the greys and browns that were dominating the shooters at the time. Don't get me wrong, it's cel-shaded greys and browns, but it was still a breath of fresh air at the time. The series did get more colourful as it went on though. There were 4 games in the Borderlands series released on the Xbox 360, and a good number of add-on packs available physically. Not only this, but there were multiple versions of the games released, with DLC included, different slipcovers, all that stuff. As a collector, if you want all the variants, you're in for a bit of a task to track them all down. The 4 standalone releases were Borderlands, Borderlands 2, Borderlands the pre-sequel, which as you can guess was a prequel, and Tales from the Borderlands, which only got a physical release in the States. The last game is the only departure from the looter-shooter genre. It's a narrative-driven adventure game by Telltale Games, the people who are most known for their Walking Dead series. To be honest, I didn't know what I was going to think about it before it came out, but I actually really enjoyed it. It's also available in the UK on later systems physically, so it might be easier for you to buy it there if you just want to play it. I'll go through a quick list of some of the different versions and add-on discs you can find. Borderlands Add-on Content Pack for the first game. Borderlands 2 Add-on Content Pack. Borderlands Game of the Year. Borderlands 2 Game of the Year. Borderlands 1 and 2 Double Pack. Borderlands Triple Pack. United States only. When it comes to slipcovers, there's ones available both the first and second game everywhere, but the one for the pre-sequel may be a US exclusive. I've never tried to look into if there are any retailer-specific variants either. All these are affordable, running you a couple of pounds in CEX, but the Game of the Year variants can get as high as £15 currently. If you're looking to get a copy of Tales from the Borderlands here in the UK for the 360, you're looking around £50 after import. After a quick Google, it does sound like the NTSC version is region-free, and will work on a PAL system though. The series has continued on to the current generation with Borderlands 3 and the upcoming Borderlands 4. Strangely, only Borderlands 1 and 2 are backwards compatible. The pre-sequel and Tales from the Borderlands are not. Here I go again, mentioning another game that you most likely wouldn't put this low down. But if you're of a certain age, you most definitely know the Prince of Persia franchise. It's been running since the late 80s and had a big resurgence on the original Xbox and PS2 era. On the 360 there were 2 releases, The Forgotten Sands and a reboot simply titled Prince of Persia. The Forgotten Sands came first and was similar to the trilogy on the PS2, these being The Sands of Time, Warrior Within and The Two Thrones. Which strangely, these 3 games got a HD release on the PS3 but not the Xbox. This would have made sense if the original Xbox versions were backwards compatible, but sadly only the first game in the trilogy, The Sands of Time, will play on newer systems. This game actually takes place between the first and second game of the trilogy, so it acts as a sort of spin-off. Gameplay is very similar and works as a 3D puzzle platformer with sections of combat. The Forgotten Sands will run you only £3.50 in CEX, and you're getting a pretty solid little action-adventure game for the price of entry. It's also never had a re-release or port anywhere. Going by how the newest release of Prince of Persia sold, I can't see it getting one either, even though that's apparently pretty good. The other game, just simply titled Prince of Persia, is a reboot of the franchise, and this time it comes with lovely cel-shaded graphics. I've just realised a large chunk of the games in this tier actually have this art style. I'm not complaining though, as these types of visuals usually age like a fine wine. Look at The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. That still looks stunning. This again is an action puzzle platformer, but this time you're joined by an AI companion, who can be used to help in traversal, and a feature that some people found rather divisive. If you die, she will always save you, be this falling to your death or being stopped by a finishing blow from an enemy, which does make the game sound a lot easier, which would be great unless you're an achievement hunter. There are achievements in the game for beating it within 12 hours and completing the game with Elika, that's her name by the way, saving you less than 100 times, which was a good challenge and a bit of fun when I went for it, but apparently after an update these are just awarded to you no matter what now. Another departure for the franchise is this game is set in an open world and you're free to explore. The game is also rather collectible heavy, but they feel like a natural progression and I didn't find any of these annoying. Combat was also surprisingly fun and parrying the enemies felt responsive. The major criticism of the game is that the true ending was hidden behind some DLC, which is still available if you're playing the game through the backwards compatibility program. But sadly it will cost you almost £7, which is double the price the game would set you back in CEX, which is a measly £3.50. Out of the two games we're speaking about today, the majority of people would tell you to play the Forgotten Sands, but I'm going to have to go the opposite way and suggest the self-titled game. I don't know why, but I really enjoyed the reboot. I think this is because I went into it seeing it as a fresh new game and wasn't expecting it to be anything like the Sands of Time trilogy. I sat there and got all the achievements from it, and I was sad when it was over. Forgotten Sands though, I'm yet to finish. Maybe I'll go back to it soon, and then maybe I'll be singing a different tune, but it just didn't grab me like the reboot did. Anyway, you can't really go wrong with either at their current price point. Another game people may have forgotten was once an Xbox 360 exclusive was Dead Rising, a very George A. Romero inspired zombies in a shopping mall photography game from Capcom. The game follows Frank West, a journalist who gets dropped off to investigate the strange goings on at the mall and ends up trapped. The game doesn't take itself too seriously, with being able to photograph zombies in stupid ways for points and being able to use anything you can find as a weapon. Or you could just loot a tutu and run around in it. Behind the silliness there is a serious story, and some of the game's bosses, known as the psychopaths, can be genuinely intimidating. The biggest issue with the game is you're on a 72-hour time limit to get everything done, and certain events only happen at certain times. Alongside this, the save situation's a bit dire. You have to make it to bathrooms to be able to save, but this can waste a lot of time as they're rather spread out. I guess this is what they were going for, to give you a bit of a risk and reward incentive of continuing without saving, but if you accidentally run into a psychopath, you will know if you're not ready, and they will kill you, and you will lose a lot of progress. The game was a massive success and received a sequel not long after, called, as what you would have guessed it, Dead Rising 2. This time you play as a different protagonist known as Chuck Green, a former motocross driver. To introduce the character, Capcom released a small downloadable title called Dead Rising 2 Case Zero, which acts as a prologue to the game. This is still available and will set you back £3.39 in the UK. Dead Rising 2 was the first in the series to include multiplayer. For some reason, back then, every game had to have some kind of multiplayer tacked on. If I remember correctly, it did also contain co-op, which to me is a good idea in this kind of game. The new character might not have gone down too well, as they later released a game called Dead Rising 2 Off the Record, which is largely the same as Dead Rising 2, but they bring back Frank West from the first game as the main protagonist. From a collectible standpoint, there are a handful of releases, most of these not setting you back a lot of money. The main games being Dead Rising 2 and Dead Rising Off the Record. These start at around £2 in CEX but max out at about £6. There's also the Dead Rising Collection, which contains all three games, but this will run you around the £18 mark. Just a bit of an increase to have them all in the same case. When I originally wrote this script it was £30, so it has actually dropped. The first two games also got steelbook variants. The first game will run you about £12 in CEX, and the second, called the Zombrex edition, is slightly higher at £15. Again, these have dropped since writing this script. Originally they were £15 and £18. See, these games are slowly coming back down. As with all the steelbooks from this generation, they weren't the best made, and a lot of them have started to go rusty. So if you do find one in good condition, get that thing sealed away from the elements somehow. Here is where I usually say all these games are backwards compatible. Not this time. Strangely, it's only that DLC prologue that's backwards compatible. That doesn't make much sense, does it? That will wrap up the intro tier to this iceberg. That was way longer than I expected. I am aware that a lot of these games that I just mentioned do come with special editions with figures and statues, but I want to keep this down to standard releases of the games. I will mention small editions like the Zombrex edition, as it's not much bigger than a standard release, and for the longest time was available everywhere at pretty much the same price. It's only in recent times they've started to be differentiated on the CEX website. Like Perfect Dark, I actually see more steelbooks for the first Dead Rising than the actual standard game, I swear. Up next, we'll talk about some games that are still relatively cheap, that might not have sold as well, or were just passed over due to their genre. Lost Planet has the title of being the first Capcom game ever released on the 360, and going back to it now, you can tell it was definitely an early title. But it's one I found myself really enjoying back then. The game is a third-person shooter set on a frozen planet. You traverse the world either on foot, using a grappling hook, or by piloting one of the game's many mechs. For a shooter, the game feels more slow-paced than you would expect, but if you're trudging through snow, it's going to slow you down, innit? When you're outside in the bitter weather, you have to keep an eye on your thermal energy, otherwise you'll freeze to death. To top this up, you can just find it around the world or gain it from killing enemies. Talking of the enemies, they come in the forms of other humans and massive bugs. The bugs use a weak point system, so you have to make sure your shots are on target, otherwise you're just wasting your ammo. The issues people had with the game was the constant need for the thermal energy, and that too much of the game when not outside felt like you were walking through the same grey hallways over and over. The game did feature online multiplayer, but this was just standard at the time. You had game modes such as point capture and deathmatch style games. They were fun for a bit, but overall they just felt tacked on. I will also note that on higher difficulties, this game is punishing. I've been trying to get it completed on extreme mode forever, but I just keep failing. Also, if you're going for all the collectible achievements, each difficulty has its own set, so you have to work on the hardest setting no matter what. There was a reissue of the game released called Lost Planet Colonies Edition. This came with more content and a separate achievement list, so if you feel like doing the game a second time, there's more of that sweet gamer score available. Lost Planet is another cheap one to add to the collection, with it only being £1.50 in CEX. But in a strange turn of events, the Colonies Edition, which comes with all the extra content, will only set you back £1. I imagine this is due to it only coming in the Classics format, and a lot of people avoid those older grey cases, as they just stick out like a sore thumb on the shelf. The game must have sold well enough though, as it did receive 2 sequels, Lost Planet 2 and Lost Planet 3. Lost Planet 2 went for a more multiplayer cooperative experience. Instead of a full-fledged linear story mode, it's broken down into smaller missions which the game wants you to repeat over and over. This one was fun with friends, but the constant replaying of missions for medals just got old rather quickly. Luckily in this one they lowered the ways in which you lose the thermal energy, but it is still used up by certain weapons and piloting mechs. Achievement hunters be warned with this one, most of the achievements are a serious grind, and again it will require some skill, as you'll be playing on the hardest difficulty setting. Lost Planet 2 is the same price as the first game, coming in at just £1.50. Lost Planet 3, however, I haven't found the time to play yet. I can tell you though it's gone back to a more narrative approach and plays more like a traditional shooter. This time you can interact with NPCs to receive side quests, upgrades, and build your own mech from parts gathered throughout the game. The thermal energy has also been transformed into a currency of sorts, so no more worrying about it depleting unless you're spending it. This one didn't seem to be as well received and gained very mixed reviews. I haven't ever spoken to anyone who's actually played it, so it must have flown pretty far under the radar. Guess I better pull this one off the shelf and give it a go. So many games, so little time. Sadly, Lost Planet 3 will cost you the most if you're going for the full subset, but luckily, it'll only cost you £10 at CEX, so it's not going to break the bank. And even better, if you don't own an actual Xbox 360, all of these are backwards compatible with the newer systems. Up next is another early title for the Xbox 360, and again, another console exclusive, this time Prey. Don't you just miss it when Xbox had exclusive games? It was a better time. The game centers around a Cherokee man who, along with his family, get abducted by aliens and taken aboard their large spaceship called the Sphere. It visits Earth to harvest resources from the planet to sustain itself, which also includes people. From here out, a horror-themed first-person shooter unfolds. The game has a few noteworthy gimmicks which set it apart from other games in the genre at the time. With the main protagonist Tommy being of Cherokee origin, he is in touch with his spiritual side and is able to project himself into the spirit world. This is mainly used as a method to avoid death. When you die, you go into the other side and play a simple shooting gallery minigame to come back to life where you left off. Of course it has narrative inclusions, but the coming back from the dead is its main use. The other uses will include being used to solve puzzles. The other gimmick was the use of portals and the ability to walk on all different surfaces such as walls and ceilings. Sadly these portals are predetermined, so they're not free to use in something like the game Portal. Again, this is another game that I played when it first came out, and the intro to it has always really stuck with me. For the first time to me, the game felt more interactive as a first-person shooter. In the intro, you're just in a bar, and in real time, the aliens destroy the place and take you on board while Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper plays. It's nothing special compared to what we have today. At the time, it gave me the same kind of feeling as when you see Rapture for the first time in the original Bioshock. Sadly, this one never got the sequel it was meant to. The franchise just got rebooted the following generation, with a confusing choice to just use the name Prey again. From what I've heard, it's a good game, but not exactly what people were hoping for. It's another I'll add to the backlog list though. This list is getting pretty long just writing this script, and I'm only on tier 2. Again, Prey on the 360 is another cheap one. CEX currently stocked for £2.50. Don't sleep on this one though. Just because a game is cheap it doesn't mean it should be avoided. Even better too, it's also backwards compatible. This is a surprisingly robust series on the Xbox 360. The MX vs ATV games during this period were pumping out titles what felt like yearly. They may have been, I'm not sure. And I've got to say, they were of varying quality. The full list of titles is MX vs ATV Untamed, MX vs ATV Reflex, MX vs ATV Alive, and MX vs ATV Supercross. All these are around the same price at CEX. They will run you about £5 each, with Supercross being slightly cheaper at £3. There isn't too much to say about these, but they're just off-road racing games with a number of different vehicles, mostly motocross and ATVs. It's kind of in the name, but they do dabble in buggies and other larger vehicles. Untamed is a HD version of the game released on the PS2. Unlike a lot of the other cross-gen titles from the early days we spoke about last time, this isn't the only way to get a HD version of the game. It also came out on PS3. All of the games are backwards compatible apart from Supercross. That might be because it was released on the Xbox One, under a new title of MX vs ATV Supercross Encore. I was actually a big fan of the series and got 1000G on all of them on the 360. There have been newer titles in this franchise released, but I haven't really had a chance to play any of them. I just haven't run across them on my travels yet. Hopefully they aren't just digital only. Sadly for achievement hunters, Reflex now has discontinued achievements, but the others are still possible to get everything on. I'll quickly mention that there were other motocross games released on the 360, as it always seems like every system needs a ton of these types of games. Have you ever looked into the library of them on the PS2? There's tons! Anyway, a few others to mention are Mud and the MXGP series. Again, these were more of the same, but Mud is a bit more of an arcadey title. Sadly, these two are not backwards compatible. Me and a couple of friends always used to have a hangover game. We would play it on a Sunday morning after a night out on the town. We always kept to things that didn't take too much of an input, as our reactions weren't the best at the time. I think Earth Defense Force 2017 was the only outlier in this. That's a brilliant game. We sat down and beat Blue Dragon, Lost Odyssey and Eternal Sonata, and we were looking for something which we hoped would be in the same vein. So I grabbed Infinite Undiscovery, hoping it would be more of the same that we were used to. Well, it isn't. It's an action RPG and not a great one at that. It's got a weird plot. Something about some evil lord chaining the planet to the moon and you have to go and break the chains? I think I only ever broke one chain and gave up. It's not the gameplay of the game in general that broke me, it's the fact that the save points are insanely far apart. Like having to finish entire dungeons and bosses before you see another one. This means when you die you're just too disheartened to continue. Some of the cutscenes are a bit cringe too. The twins excited about dinner has become a bit of a meme.
Time now, so you can come too.
Her place? No one told me about that.
Let's go now. I'm really hungry. Dinner, 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 dinner.
If you're looking for an exclusive RPG and can get past the jank, then maybe some fun to be had. I've tried to start this up a few times, but even the enemy designs just put me off. They're just some of the crappiest monsters I've ever seen in an RPG. I don't think I'll commit to going back to this one, but it deserved a mention. I'm starting to sound like a broken record with this, but it's also backwards compatible and still rather affordable, which is always strange for RPGs, but it'll only cost you £6 in CEX. This is another one that's also dropped in value since I wrote this. It was £8. These games are coming down. I don't know if they'll ever reach what they were, but we can hope. Pure is a game a lot of people may have owned, but may not have given a good amount of time to. The reason it has found its way into many people's possession is that it came bundled with the console in a double pack along with LEGO Batman. A set of games we're not going to talk about today, since I went over the countless LEGO games in the first part of this Iceberg series. Oh crap, did I just say series? I've popped it here in the list though, as since it was a pack-in title, not many people sought out to find the individual release. It's an arcade quad bike racing game and a very good one at that. Way more arcadey than the MX vs ATV games, hence its own entry. It's your standard lap style races with the odd trick-based events thrown in. This was created by BlackRock Studios for Disney Interactive. The game has a great sense of speed and tight controls that just work, but you've got to give it your full attention or you're not going to come first. This is one I sat down with until I had the full 1000G. I really couldn't put it down and I'd recommend it to anyone who's into the arcade racing genre. It's also backwards compatible, so don't sleep on this one. If you want to pick this up in CEX, the double pack version will run you £2.50, with its solo counterpart coming in at the same. This would just boil down if you want two games for the price of one, or if you're a purist and want the full artwork. There's also a variant with a shiny silver cover. That may sway you to go for the single version. This has never been re-released anywhere, but if you enjoyed Split Second, another arcade racer by BlackRock, it can't hurt to check out what they released before. As a bonus, there's another super fast-paced arcade quad bike racer called Nailed, which isn't as polished, but I still had a blast with it. It too also won't break the bank, coming in at just £4, but I don't see it pop up in the wild as much as Pure. It also contains broken achievements in the DLC, but that isn't available anymore, so that's nothing to worry about. Sadly, that isn't backwards compatible though. Here's a well-known game, which has now been remastered and even received a sequel in recent years. So why did I put it in this tier? Well, these are still games that a lot of people played, but weren't in the upper echelon of releases. Why would I put this so low even though it's fantastic and garnered so much praise? Simply due to its genre. Horror games aren't for everyone. The game plays out like an episodic TV show that clearly takes inspiration from franchises such as Twin Peaks and from the works of Stephen King. So what kind of game is Alan Wake? Well, it boils down to just being a third-person shooter where you have to use light to weaken the enemies, which come in the forms of possessed townfolk and inanimate objects. If this is drawing similarities to a later released Remedy game, you're not going mad. It is in the same universe, but I won't say what that game is to avoid spoilers, but it's pretty easy to work out. There are a few differences between this game and the remaster, which might have actually been for the better in the later releases. The main one being is the original is full of product placement for Energizer batteries. You'll be collecting these incredibly frequently as your torch eats through batteries quicker than a Game Gear and a car ride. Bit of a bad advertisement for a battery company who wants to promote how long they last if you think about it. The other one is for Verizon, which appears on multiple billboards. This is one I didn't really notice or even know if it's in the UK version, since Verizon just isn't a thing here. We do know what they do though. One of the best things about the game, other than the fantastic story and the incredibly satisfying headshots, is the music. It contains music by the Finnish rock group Poets of the Fall, which have made music for other Remedy games such as Max Payne. In this, they've created songs under the pseudonym The Old Gods of Asgard, which is a fictional band within the game itself. The Poet and the Muse being a song I regularly have in playlists till this day. I've yet to play the sequel, but that was due to it being a digital-only game for the longest time, and I just couldn't spend that amount of money they were asking for a digital item. Luckily, holding off has meant that there is a physical available now, and I'll be grabbing it as soon as I can. It's funny to think the original Alan Wake was an Xbox 360 exclusive, when it's widely available pretty much everywhere now. The cheapest place to play it is still on the 360 now, as it will only set you back £3 here in the UK at CEX. If you're a completionist though, be aware there is DLC, which is still available if played through the backwards compatibility program. But here comes the main reason for its inclusion in this tier. The game also contains unlockable avatar items, but if you want these and actually want to have 100% on all stats in the game, you're going to have to buy the Alan Wake Limited Edition. But that's £25 and not really worth it for some digital bits of clothing which no one can really see anymore, is it? Just play this game any way you can, it's genuinely fantastic. There's a large number of Cabela's hunting games available on the Xbox 360. The prices for these though are all over the place, starting from as low as £8 and currently hitting the highs of $65 in CEX. These used to be everywhere in second-hand shops, but over time they've just dropped off a little, which is strange as I really don't know who these games are for. Here in the UK we're not the biggest population of pro hunting people, and if you choose to hunt foxes, you're an asshole. I guess due to this we did actually miss out on a few of these releases, but I don't think it was that big of a loss. These are basically just really janky first-person hunting games. They did dabble into the Kinect minigame territory, with a small detour from the hardcore hunting, which if you want to know more about, check out my video all about Kinect games released on the 360. I'll put a link in the description somewhere. Towards the end of the series they also branched off into the peripheral game. Everybody needed a big plastic thing at that point, didn't they? Now you can buy a gun and take your hunting to the next level. To be honest, the technology for the gun is actually pretty cool, and a couple of other games did support it, but they never really made a push to advertise its use. The biggest departure for the series, apart from the Kinect game of course, was Shadow of Katmai, which takes a bit more of an adventure survival game style and was played in third person. Here's a full list of the Cabela's games if you want to go for them all. Alaskan Adventures, African Safari, Trophy Bucks, US exclusive, Big Game Hunter 2008, Dangerous Hunts 2009, it's also called Dangerous Adventures in PAL territories for some reason, Outdoor Adventures, which is a US exclusive, Big Game Hunter 2010, again, US only, North American Adventures, you can guess where that's exclusive to, Dangerous Hunts 2011, Big Game Hunter, Hunting Party, yeah, another one for the States, Adventure Camp, Survival of Katmai, Big Game Hunter 2012, Hunting Expeditions, again, more for the US, Dangerous Hunts 2013, not to be confused with African Safari, there's also African Adventures, which is a US exclusive, and we'll end it with a US exclusive of Big Game Hunter Pro Hunts. So as you can see, it's a proper rabbit hole if you want to go down the collecting of all of these subpar games. At least if you want PAL only, it's pretty easy. Some of the US exclusives are going to cost you a pretty penny as well if you're not over in America. These can actually get into the hundreds, so I can't give exact prices for these, as it changes daily. At least most of these are easy gamer score, but that's about as much praise as I could give them. What's even more surprising is 4 of these games are actually backwards compatible. Those being Alaskan Adventures, Dangerous Hunts 2013, Hunting Expeditions, and Cabela's Survival Shadows of Katmai. I've never looked to see if Hunting Expeditions is region free or not, but if it isn't, you would be able to play it on a PAL Xbox One with an American disc, or a Series X. You know, whatever you've got with a disc tray that came afterwards. There's not too much to say about Overlord, but these games don't seem to get too much praise. It's an action role-playing series where you play a resurrected warrior known as the Overlord. From here you're tasked with taking down corrupted heroes who are ruling the land. And when you defeat them, you take over their land. Seems a bit hypocritical. The game plays a little bit like an evil Pikmin game. You can summon gremlins to do your bidding as well as attack enemies directly. These gremlins are mostly used to clear paths and move objects, but they can also hold their own in fights when used in great numbers. The game also features a morality system a bit like the Fable games, so you can become as evil or as nice as you want. I do feel the game wants you to be more on the evil side though. The main standout for the game is its dark humour, which can really be seen in the achievement list in the sequel, but we won't go too far into that one. But there is an achievement for killing 100 baby seals. I did say it was dark. The game was released on the PS3 as Overlord Raising Hell, but on the 360 we only got the base game and the rest of the content was added as DLC, which has sadly been removed from the store. This means earning all the achievements is sadly unobtainable. I have yet to play any of Overlord 2, but to my knowledge it's just more of the same, so if you enjoyed the first one, I guess you can't really go wrong with a sequel. As with a lot of games we've mentioned, these are both backwards compatible with the newer systems, and very affordable. Both games will cost you only £6 each in CEX. Spec Ops: The Line is the 2012 reboot of the Spec Ops series. It's actually the 7th game in the long-running franchise. I think due to this, people didn't really pay much attention to it at the time of release, as they just guessed it was another third-person cover-based shooter, especially from all the magazine and online coverage before launch. But most people these days know that this isn't the case, and the game does what few are brave enough to attempt. I don't really want to go into the story of the game, as if you don't know how it plays out, it's 100% better to go in blind. For the longest time, this was a £1 game and could be found in almost every second-hand store. But with the Xbox 360 store closing and the game being pulled from other online storefronts, it had a bit of a boom and became rather sought after for a while. At its heights, it was hitting £75 for a copy, but luckily the madness has died down and the game has settled to around £15 in CEX. No, it's not the bargain it used to be for such a good title, but it's still way more affordable than £75. If you see this one out and about cheap, you really can't go wrong with it. Even better though, it's also backwards compatible with the newer hardware. I know hearing me say that at the end is going to get boring, but believe me, they aren't all backwards compatible. Especially not further down the list. The U-Draw tablet was an underrated but costly mistake for the company THQ. If you've never seen one of these before, it's a wireless drawing tablet with controller buttons and motion controls. I think its childish look was mostly its downfall, but the marketing wasn't there either, even though they did try to push it rather hard, and it was released at an affordable price of about £50. They bundled it with U-Draw Instant Artist, which is a fun little title. It's mostly just an artist's tool, but also contains some really fun mini-games. The tablet itself is rather responsive and easy to use. It did get a small list of games released for it, but they were mostly licensed titles. They were U-Draw Studio Instant Artist, which came with it, Pictionary Ultimate Edition, and Marvel Superhero Squad Comic Combat. Pictionary worked well and plays exactly as you expect. Instead of a pen and paper, you just use the tablet to draw the clues on screen. Marvel Superhero Squad was the only game released for the Xbox 360 version which could have actually been classed as a full video game though. It's played from an overhead perspective, and it's a sort of beat 'em up, but you tell the characters what to do like a real-time strategy game. I honestly didn't enjoy this one, but I do feel with time the tablet could have actually been used for some fun and interesting games, but sadly it didn't get its time to shine. The tablet and U-Draw Instant Artist will only cost you £5 in CEX, but that's up to you if you want to grab it just for this handful of games. But with Pictionary only costing you £1 and Marvel Superhero Squad at only £1.50, it's a very cheap and easy subset to complete. Also, all the achievements are really easy on all three titles. And I finally get to say it again, none of these titles are backwards compatible, due to needing the tablet to function. Who doesn't love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Or Hero Turtles if you're old and from the UK like me. I still think it's mad that the UK changed the name back in the day. Well, the Xbox 360 got 4 games featuring these pizza-loving reptiles. They were TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Danger of the Ooze, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutants in Manhattan. I'm not the best when it comes to the English language, and that last one was a bit of a tongue twister. The first, simply called TMNT, is a game based off the 2007 movie of the same name. The game is a rather short and easy time from Ubisoft and features some of the same gameplay as the 3D Prince of Persia games, such as the acrobatics and the wall running. As you can guess from the fact it's a licensed game, it's pretty mediocre, but it's far from the worst on the console. It's a very easy gamerscore though for the achievement hunters out there. This will cost you £10 at CEX in the UK. With it being a licensed property, it's not backwards compatible, and you will require an actual Xbox 360 to play this one. The next was just called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but this time it was based on the 2012 TV show from Nickelodeon of the same name. Again, this one's another very easy 1000G for achievement aficionados, and it's not too long, but it does feel like a slog. It's a slow-paced beat-em-up which you will get through by mashing just the same combo over and over. All the hits also feel like they have no weight to them, so there's little to no satisfaction from the combat. This one will only cost you £5 at CEX, and even that feels like too much unless you're a TMNT super fan. The third game to be released was also based on the Nickelodeon show. This was Dangers of the Ooze, and again it goes for a different style of gameplay. It's a pretty basic side-scrolling Metroidvania. Of these first 3 games, this is the one that people have always told me is the best, but I would suggest the first one based on the movie. If you're not a fan of doing anything in a time limit and want all the achievements from this one, I will have to let you know it does have a speedrun achievement. This is the only one I've started and couldn't be bothered to go back to. Again, it's another one which will only run you about a £5 in CEX. Finally, the last game is the one which may have the most polish. It's Mutants in Manhattan. It was created by the folks at Platinum Games, you know, the people behind Bayonetta and Vanquish. Fans had high hopes for this one, but a lot of reviews said it fell flat. It was panned for being a bit bland and repetitive, but I imagine they were working with a lot of restrictions from the IP holder. But even with all this, it is the most solid title on the Xbox 360 featuring the heroes in a half shell. It is just your standard action beat 'em up though. It's sadly also one I wouldn't have put into this category if I wasn't already talking about the Turtles games, only due to the price. It will run you about £18 in CEX, but this is down to it being removed from all the stores and not being backwards compatible. Even the Xbox One version is pretty much the same price, coming in at around £15. Even with this pricier title, it is still an easy subset to complete for the system though. Another long-running franchise to get games on the Xbox 360 was the Test Drive games. There were 3 released for the system, these being Test Drive Unlimited, Test Drive Unlimited 2, and Test Drive Ferrari Racing Legends. The Unlimited series are large open-world games. They kind of play like Forza Horizon before Forza Horizon. This includes my personal favourite addition of being able to colour in all the roads you have driven on. Yeah, I know I'm sad, but for some reason I find this really relaxing. Back in the day, you could run into other human drivers on the roads and challenge them to races. You could also join online clubs and try to climb the leaderboards. But luckily this game does have an offline component and can still be played today. The game features all the usual open world events such as races, time trials and vehicle transport missions. In these you race against the clock to deliver a car without causing too much damage, as this will affect your payout. These are also my favourite types of events in the game. Sadly, online portions of the game have been shut down now, so not all achievements are possible, and the game will look and feel rather dated. But I really enjoyed this one, and if you're a racing fan looking for something different, give this one a go. It got a direct follow-up in the form of Test Drive Unlimited 2, which when it launched had a lot of issues and bugs, but most of these got ironed out over the years through patches. To be honest, it's more of the same, just in a different location. It also had a large focus on being able to visit an online casino to try and make money to buy more cars or houses. Again, I had a good time when I was playing this one, but it was overall a much harder completion, as it required you to play with way more players, whereas the first game was a majority single-player experience. With 2 being a more online experience and the service being shut down, the game has a whopping 23 discontinued achievements. So if you don't mind something looking incomplete on your tag, there's still some fun to be found here. Out of the 2 games, I would actually recommend the first, as you will have more of the features available, but in my opinion, both are worth your time. Unlimited 1 will set you back just £6 in CEX, with 2 being a bit pricier, coming in at around 10. You will also need an actual Xbox 360 to play both of these titles. The third game in the Test Drive series was a return to a standard track racer. This is Ferrari Racing Legends. The game is a rather simple premise. You work your way through a set of races and challenges celebrating the history of Ferrari. This one was actually made by Slightly Mad Studios, the people who would go on to make the Need for Speed Shift and Project Cars series. If you didn't get on with the handling in them games, you might not enjoy this one. Luckily, they were some of my all-time favourite racers, so I really enjoyed Ferrari Racing Legends. There are some frustrating parts to it though, as some of the older cars handle really poorly, but this should be expected from those vehicles. Also, to display age, it sometimes displays the races in a sepia tone, but this didn't really bother me. I found this one to be the easiest completion of the 3, as it's a completely offline experience when it comes to the achievements. This one used to be pretty difficult to come by, so much so that I had to import it from Canada to play originally. Now it's readily available and it'll only set you back £8 in CEX, and of course it isn't backwards compatible being a licensed title. Tales of Vesperia at one point was one of the Xbox 360's bigger hitters. It's the 10th entry in the Tales of series, and it's one of the better received ones from the whole franchise. The game isn't a turn-based RPG, but when an enemy attacks you, it does go into a separate area in which you get to duke it out with your foes. Being an RPG, the game has a long story, which I was enjoying, but I got distracted by something shiny and never went back to it. With an achievement list that takes between 150 and 200 hours to complete, this isn't one for the faint of heart to decide to tackle. If achievements are your thing, that is. To this day, the game looks great with its cel-shaded anime art style. I mentioned earlier that this used to cost a decent amount. It's actually had a definitive edition released on the Xbox One and PS4, so this caused the original to plummet in price, which is great for people going for a full Xbox 360 set. This will now only cost you £8 in CEX, which, going by its length, that's a lot of game for its value. With this having a re-release, you probably could have guessed that it isn't backwards compatible, but I feel like I need to let you know either way. This is a bit of a weird one, and not for the game itself. Too Human is a role-playing game about Norse mythology, but with a science fiction twist. The game itself uses a rather strange control scheme, with the attacks being on the right analog stick. I wasn't a fan of this, as I kept trying to move the camera and was spamming random attacks. I didn't really enjoy anything I played of this game, which is a shame, as it was by the same people who put out one of my favourite GameCube games, Eternal Darkness. Don't let my experience of this game put you off though. One of my friends had a blast with the game and genuinely loved it. Sadly, I didn't get too far into it, so if I went back, I may change my mind. But I wanted to add it to the list just to mention its strange history. The game was in development hell for about 10 years, and when it finally released, a few years later it was discovered that Silicon Knights had used Epic's Unreal Engine 3 to create the game without the proper credentials, and they ended up getting sued. They were ordered to pull the game from sale and destroy all any unsold copies. This happened, but they must have got a hell of a lot out into the public, as it didn't really do anything to the price of the game. Unlike other pooled games, which usually go for mad prices, this one will only set you back £1 in CEX. They had the same issue with another game they developed at the same time, which is also recalled. The other game was X-Men Destiny, if you're interested. The Ride franchise started on the Xbox 360. If you've never heard of it, the easiest way to describe it would be the Forza Motorsport series for bikes. This was the game that actually got me into bike racing games. All of the others I'd tried before I found too difficult to get into, but this had a nice easy learning curve. Apart from a few time trials, it was a rather casual experience. There are some frame rate issues, but overall the game is a solid title. Well, it must have been. It spawned numerous sequels, but the first one is one of my favourites. I think they're up to Ride 5 now on newer systems. I found though that as the series went on, it lost its accessibility and went into a bit more of a hardcore motorbike sim. This actually made me drop off the series. I beat all of them up to number 3, which had way too much DLC, and 4 just wasn't fun, so I dropped it. So the easiest answer to this issue is just go back and play the first one on the 360, and it's just £6 in CEX. And it's really worth your time if you want to play something a bit different from all the car racers on the system. If the frame rate is a big issue for you though, it did come out on later systems. And with that, we've reached the end of this tier. Coming up next are the games that have just got pricier, and if you see them for cheap, you probably should just pick them up. It doesn't mean they're going to be of good quality, they just have a bit more value. The original idea behind the third tier was to put games in that were between £10 to £30. A couple of these have changed since I wrote this, but I will make note of that. But I think they are still a bit more obscure, so we will put them into this category. So up first is Ninja Blade. It's something you don't see too often, an affordable From Software game. But I have to admit, it is definitely cheaper than when I wrote this. When I wrote this, it was at £12 in CEX. Then I made an edit and dropped it down to £8. It's now currently £6. These games are dropping in price. People seem to think they're rising, they are dropping. But I'm going to keep it here anyway, as on eBay it does still sell for around the £10 mark from time to time. These prices jump around so much, I'd be editing this video forever. So what is Ninja Blade? It's basically FromSoft's take on the Ninja Gaiden formula, but with a lot more QuickTime events. When it was released, it was panned for having so many, but for some reason games like God of War get a pass in this respect. At times it does feel a bit more like playing something like Azura's Wrath, which has so many cutscenes it might as well be an interactive movie. But when there is the action gameplay in this, it's pretty solid. And on the higher difficulties, fans of the other From Software games should find something here to enjoy. The story is also all over the place, and a tad insane, and the action set pieces are bizarre enough to rival any other games in this genre, such as Bayonetta. It has something to do with worm parasites taking over people, but to explain its actual insanity, the part of the game that really sticks in my mind is where you're catching a motorbike in mid-air, riding it down some buses, which are also airborne, which have been thrown at you, then throwing the bike back at the mouth of a giant worm. I don't even know if that sentence made any sense. If all this sounds like your kind of game, you can't really go wrong, and it's got a low price of entry. Sadly, I've never finished this one, as these types of action games just are usually way above my skill level, but I will go back to it one day. I think maybe the fact that it's not backwards compatible is what has been dropping the price on this one. What would you get if you were to strip out all of the budget of a Call of Duty game, but still be allowed to use the engine? You'd get Secret Service. Don't quote me on if it actually uses the same engine, but it sure as hell feels like a Call of Duty game, and it was published by Activision. You play an elite agent who is tasked with defusing bombs and stopping enemies from attacking the Capitol building after the President of the United States gets shot. I have played all the way through this one, and I'm going to have to say, I kind of enjoyed it. It's not hard and definitely not long, but if you want some mindless shooty action with the odd bomb defusing puzzle thrown in here and there are much worse games like this available. I will have to note that pretty much every level feels the same, and I'm pretty sure the locations get reused, which is mad in what's already a very small game. There also isn't much variation to the enemies, but for a budget shooter, what more do you expect? Since this game came out in the time where every game under the sun had to have a multiplayer mode shoehorned in, it's odd that this is missing one. I guess they didn't have any hope in this selling well, and as most people have never heard of it, I guess they must have been correct. If you're an achievement hunter and competent at first-person shooters, well, of course you are if you're hunting achievements, you've got to be. The list is pretty easy. Do some mini-games in a row, beat the game on certain difficulties, and get some collectibles. Sadly, there is one for completing the game without dying, which although not too bad can be messed up if the game crashes, which it is prone to doing. There is another game on this list later which is basically the same engine with a different skin, which also has some of the same issues, but we'll cover that when we get there. Strangely, there is another budget first-person shooter which came out about 7 years ago, also called Secret Service. I don't think this is a remake or has anything to do with it though. And how much is all this budget action going to cost you? Well, at the time of writing, only £10 in CEX. This is actually lower than it has been in recent years, so it might be worth jumping on it while you can. Stock levels are also looking surprisingly high for such a niche title. This is one that unfortunately never saw enough love to receive the backwards compatibility treatment, but I don't think too many people were crying about it. Beautiful Katamari is one of those games that used to always feel like the definition of a hidden gem. It wasn't the first in the series, but the first time it hit an Xbox console, and it wasn't overly spoken about much within the gaming media. Fast travel to the present day though, and the love for this franchise has exploded, with games in the series starting to get modern re-releases. Currently this one has remained an Xbox 360 exclusive though, but for how long, I don't know. Enough of that though, what is Beautiful Katamari? If you answered a fever dream where you roll around a ball, which you try to make large enough to absorb everything in existence, you'd be correct. It's that simple of a premise. You start off small and only small objects stick to the ball, but as the ball grows, you can roll up larger and larger items. I would like to explain the story to you, but it's weird. So here is a direct quote from Wikipedia to explain what is going on in one of the weirdest games ever pressed to a disc. The game opens with the king of all cosmos, his queen and the prince enjoying some tennis while on vacation. However, a powerful serve by the king causes the tennis ball to rip through the fabric of the universe, creating a black hole that sucks everything but the planet Earth into it. In order to correct it, the king commands the prince to roll up Katamaris on Earth to recreate the planets, sun, and other celestial features. Once the prince completes this, the king then orders him to create a Katamari large enough to plug up the black hole and restore order to the universe. The prince then rolls up enough stuff to create the supergiant, a very large Katamari that he then clogs up the black hole with. In the end, the black hole is stopped and the king of all cosmos takes all the credit for stopping it. Yeah, that's the story of the whole game. But as you can tell, it's not really about the story, it's all about the fun and addictive gameplay. Well, it needs to be fun since all the Katamari games are pretty much the same. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. If this sounds like something up your street, it will currently set you back just £12 in CEX. And to be honest, it's worth it. A quick note for the achievement hunters out there. This one will run you somewhere in the realm of 80 to 100 hours to complete. So if you're a completionist, be ready for the grind. With this being an Xbox 360 exclusive, you won't be surprised to find out that this one is backwards compatible. You know when Gameception has been committed that a series really has a fan base. What am I talking about? Well, the Persona 4 Arena games are spin-off fighting games of the Persona series, which itself is a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei series. I've not looked into it, I don't know if that's a spin-off or something. Sadly, I don't get to talk about the Persona Rhythm games spin-offs here, as they never got Xbox releases, but you never know what's coming up down the pipeline. Plus, I've spoke about them in some other videos recently if you want to go check them out. The best way to describe these games are 2D fighters with over-the-top presentation and visual novel-length dialogue between fights. Don't let that put you off though, as you can easily skip past these bits and somewhat quickly get back into the action. Although fighting games aren't my genre, I can tell that these are some pretty solid games hidden underneath all that flashiness. There are 2 games on the series on the Xbox 360, first being Persona 4 Arena, and the second Persona 4 Arena Ultimax. I'm not big on the lore of Persona, even though I have played the games. I've never dedicated enough time to actually finish one, but I believe the games contain characters from both Persona 3 and 4. The first in the series will run you around £10 at CEX, with the sequel being not far behind at around 15. These once saw larger spikes on the PS3, but have now settled down in price, but they're still more costly than the 360 counterparts, but not by a lot. If you're looking to play these though on newer systems, only the first game is backwards compatible. The way this game has been handled by Ubisoft is criminal, and it adds to the reason of why it's not been played by anywhere near enough people. Once upon a time, the Driver franchise was looked at for inspiration and was a 3D open world driving experience before GTA. The sequel Driver 2 was also loved by fans as it included on-foot sections. Sadly, when Driver 3 was released, the quality took a dip. The game was trying to be too ambitious for its tight deadlines and was released in a buggy mess. I do know some people who are big fans of the third game, even with its flaws. To try and bounce back, they released a follow-up called Driver Parallel Lines, where the developers listened to the fans and tried to release the game they wanted to. But again, it came out to middling reviews, so you can see why people were skeptical when San Francisco launched. But having this mindset means you could have missed out on some of the best fun I've personally had in an open world driving game. You see, the game actually all takes place in the main protagonist's mind as he sits in a coma. This means you aren't bound to any realism, and importantly, one character. You can leave your body and take over anyone driving cars around you to help complete missions. What I mean is, if you're chasing down a criminal, hijack a car up in front and cause a giant pileup to create a roadblock, or T-bone someone off the road. There is an in-game explanation why you can't just hijack the man you're chasing, but I can't remember it. I was just having too much fun causing carnage. Earlier when I said it was handled badly by Ubisoft, I mean it was pulled from all storefronts and incredibly difficult to get running on the PC from the physical version. This was released on the PS3 as well, but you will need a working PS3 to play that, which is still pretty common, but the older these systems get, they will eventually die. This is why you should buy the 360 version. It is not confined to just the Xbox 360, it's part of the backwards compatibility program, so it can be played on modern systems such as the Series X. Basically, Microsoft has stepped in and rescued the game from obscurity. You will need a physical copy though, so sorry Series S users. I don't know why you'd buy that system anyway. This fantastic game will only run you around £10 in CEX, which is a bargain for the amount of fun to be had. Sadly, the online functions were set to be shut down, but the achievement tracking sites are saying that nothing is unobtainable achievement-wise, at time of writing of course. So like a few other Ubisoft games, it may have risen from the grave for the meantime, in some kind of zombie state, just like Rayman Legends. Do yourself a favour and give this one a go. You won't regret it. Do you like Family Guy? Do you like mediocre third-person shooters? Well, I've got the game for you. Family Guy Back to the Multiverse. The game is kind of set out like one of those Family Guy specials, where you just play as Stewie and Brian and go on a bit of a multiverse-hopping adventure. Even through its different multiverses, the game felt, to me, more like a time travel experience. All the levels feel pretty much identical, but with a different skin for the setting. But if you're a fan of the show, there's enough here to keep you entertained in small bursts. It's not a long game, or a hard game, but if you're going for all the achievements, make sure you do everything in a level before moving on. Otherwise your progress gets reset playing again. The game didn't review the best, but it doesn't deserve all the hate it received, as it does have some redeemable features, mostly in the easy achievements that are up for grabs, but it did also get a couple of laughs out of me. It was also just fun to explore the Family Guy universe. The game does also contain a multiplayer mode, but it wasn't online, it's just local multiplayer. This is one of the more expensive to pop up on here so far, and it'll run you around £22 on CEX. Again, being a licensed property, it isn't backwards compatible. Mayhem 3D is a game you may not have heard about on your 360 collecting journey, especially if you're here in the UK. It only came out in the States, but fear not, it runs on a PAL system, so there's no reason not to pick it up if you see it. For some reason it got a release here on the PS3 in the PAL region, although it's not a cheap one. Even though you will have to go to eBay for a copy for the 360, luckily it should only run you about £30. Just remember to try and buy one which includes the 3D glasses if you want your copy to be complete. Yet again, I've talked about this game and not told you anything about it. Well, it's a 3D racing/destruction derby style game. What makes it stand out though is its presentation. It's displayed in a graphic novel black and white aesthetic, similar to that of Mad World on the Wii. Overall the game isn't great though. It's a bit janky and plays pretty much how you'd expect, but if you're curious and have run out of games to play for the PAL library, it's worth a go. Again, it's a nice easy one for achievement hunters, but you will require someone else to play a few rounds with online. Sadly, again, this one wasn't included in the backwards compatibility program. I'm actually only about halfway through this one, so I can't add much else to say about it. I'll go back to it when I find somebody to play online with. Omerta, City of Gangsters is one that sits in its own category on the 360. It's a tactical, turn-based strategy game featuring gangsters. I can't think of another one of these available on the system, can you? But I might be wrong. It's got the typical start at the bottom and work your way up through the rank-style mob story. The game is set in the 1920s in Atlantic City, and the developer boasts its highly accurate depiction of the city in the era of Prohibition. I couldn't tell you though. Never been there, and I don't own a time machine. The game had overall negative reviews on the 360 due to it primarily being a PC game ported to the console, and these don't usually fare too well in the move over in the controls department. Although I own this one, it's still sitting sealed in its wrapper. That's because this isn't the style of game that I usually gravitate towards. This doesn't mean it will never be played though. I can't just judge something by its cover. For the collectors out there, this one is possible to be found with a nice slipcover, so keep your eyes peeled. This one didn't get the backwards compatibility treatment either, and it does contain DLC achievements, which sadly now with the store shut, you can no longer purchase. So 100% completion on your gamertag is no longer available for this one. After a quick check, this has actually gone up in price from the £12 I had it listed down as. It's now currently £15 in CEX. Something the 360 does that rarely happened on the PS3 was a HD version of a PS2 era release, which was only available in one place. This happened again with Looney Tunes Acme Arsenal, a 3D action platformer set in the Looney Tunes world. It's yet another game on this list that came out to negative reviews, but if you're like me and enjoyed the old games on the PS1 like Bugs Bunny Times Busters, you should get a bit of enjoyment out of it. The camera's hard to understand though. It's all inverted. I don't like that. It scares me. The game was designed to be played in co-op though, and because of this it includes a viral achievement where you need to play online with someone who's already got it. Good luck with this though, you're not going to find anyone playing this randomly, and you're going to have to get chatting to people online for help. Someone recently helped me with it. Thank you. Other than that annoyance, it's not too bad. A bit buggy here and there, but nothing to the levels of some of the other 3D platformers, which were being pumped out at the time. Yes, I'm looking at you, Brave a Warrior's Tale. Yet again, the licensed title curse has befallen this one. It's not backwards compatible, but luckily it's not too pricey to track down. It's sitting at just £12 in CEX. Saying that though, it isn't one I run into often, but it is out there, especially online. Now we have a real stinker to talk about. Rambo, the video game. If you were to make a game about Rambo, you'd want to make it a high action game where it makes you feel like a total badass. What you don't do is create an incredibly ugly on-rails shooter. I don't know what they did with the character models, but they truly give off some kind of uncanny valley vibe. Anyway, the game takes place over scenes from the first 3 Rambo movies. If this game was to be played with a light gun, it could actually have been a bit of fun. I did look to see if it was compatible with the Top Shot Elite Xbox 360 gun, but I couldn't find an answer. But since that is very game specific, I'd have to guess it wouldn't work. I don't own one to try it out sadly. Other than that, the game contains stealth shooter and bomb defusal sections, but being a rail shooter, these don't really change all that much. There are also upgrades you can unlock between missions, and it has the standard cover mechanic, which has been in these types of games forever. Apart from that, it's an incredibly shallow experience, but it's a genre that was quite lacking on the 360, and mostly for good reason, as without peripherals, these games just aren't the same. This is one where it might be more fun to buy the PS3 copy, as it's compatible with the PS Move controllers. Here I go again, repeating myself. It's a licensed title. You know what that means. It's not backwards compatible. This turd will also run you £25 in CEX. It also has a whopping 7 discontinued achievements. That's due to these being tied to the Baker Team DLC, and as everyone knows by now, the store is long gone. It's mad that the developers of this game went on to make RoboCop Rogue City and Terminator Resistance, games that I've heard are actually really fun. So that's it. That's the end of this section. This was actually a surprisingly short section, but as we get deeper into the depths of this iceberg, let's get pricier. We're talking £30 plus pricier now. I briefly mentioned an X-Men game earlier. This was X-Men Destiny. It was pulled into that controversy with Too Human, and was also pulled from the store shelves. Like Too Human, this didn't see any kind of crazy price hike. To my knowledge, it's a game where you play as New Mutants in the wake of Professor X's death, but I haven't played it. But if you want to, it'll only cost you £6 in CEX. If you play it, tell me if I've made the right choice keeping it on the shelf for all these years or not. There was also a terrible movie tie-in game for X-Men 3, but it takes place between the events of X-Men 2 and X-Men 3. This is one I have unfortunately played and got the 1000G on. You play as 3 characters, Wolverine, Nightcrawler and Iceman. The Wolverine sections play like a bad 3D beat 'em up, but unfortunately, they're the highlight of the game. The Nightcrawler sections have more of a parkour style gameplay to them, where you teleport around the level, but it also contains that awful beat 'em up gameplay. These are the worst parts of the game for me, as I found I would teleport to places I just didn't want to, and I kept falling through the scenery. This made beating this game on the hardest setting a right slog. Finally, the Iceman stages play like a flight sim. You spend most of your time sliding around on the ice in the air shooting targets. And of course it wouldn't be a bad superhero game without a few checkpoints/rings to fly through. If you're mad enough to add this jank to your collection, it's only going to set you back £6 in CEX. But these two aren't the reason we're talking about X-Men in this section. We're here to talk about X-Men Origins Wolverine. This was a tie-in game to the movie of the same name, but I thought I had to give the other games a mention, simply because when else am I going to? But this game was actually released to a generally positive reception. It actually isn't anything special, it's just a 3D beat-em-up. Not much different than the Wolverine sections in the X-Men official game. But where this differs is it didn't target a child audience. This game was released with an age rating of 18 here in the UK, and it was just made to be violent. If you want to play as Wolverine and just rip through people with all the blood and guts which would happen if a man with claws actually attacked you, then this is the game for you. This is another that I have finished 100%, but my views on the game are a little different to the people I've spoken to in the past, and even the critics of the game. I found the violence got old quite quick, and it just boiled down to killing all the enemies in an area so it would allow me to move on. But this is how God of War works, and people love that. Sadly these days, if you want to give this one a go, it's going to run you somewhere between 25 and 30 plus. There does seem to be a lot of fluctuation on it. It was already climbing in price, but it got a right boost when the Deadpool and Wolverine movie came out. Luckily that hype has died down a bit now. Actually, it might be worth the £30 just to put someone headfirst into the blades of a flying helicopter. Due to all of these being licensed titles, you know that if you want to play them, you're going to have to dust off the old 360 console itself. When the NFL dropped their license for the NFL Blitz games, Blitz the League was born. This is where Midway just went a bit nuts with an American football game. Here you play matches where you get to break bones, which include X-ray close-ups of them cracking or tendons snapping, take steroids, and overall just play dirty. Yes, it's got all that edgy Midway charm from back in the day. Even with all this though, it's still an American football game, so not for me. But it is going in the right direction to make the sport interesting. The first game in the series will only set you back about £10 in CEX, but it's the sequel that's made it pop up this low in the iceberg. For some reason, Blitz the League 2 will cost you £30 in CEX, and that's a good price for it, as on eBay it's usually way more. It's also quite often out of stock. My copy is sadly missing the manual, and I've never had any luck tracking one down. I don't want to buy the whole thing again just for one either. Both of these games contain a career mode which have some wild subplots, some of them which mirror real-world controversies with players. This might have been the reason that the second one got a lower release. Or it could just be that the first one didn't sell well in the UK. I don't know, this could actually be incredibly common in the US, where a market for something like this would be much larger. All I can tell you is that in the UK, it's a sports game and it's on the pricier side, and that neither of these games are playable on newer hardware. Never Dead was a game I pledged to myself last year I would go back to and complete. Did I? No. Did I put it in the console? No. But have I played it before? Yes. But this isn't a video about whether or not I've played these games. It's about highlighting them for anyone collecting for the 360. So what is Never Dead? It's a rather low budget third person shooter where the gimmick is that your character is immortal. As you take damage you lose body parts and have to roll around Katamari style to get them back. This could have been a very interesting game, but of course they couldn't just let you have fun with it. You're accompanied by a woman who isn't immortal, so you spend all your time trying to keep her alive. This can lead to the game getting frustrating on higher difficulties, but if you want some dumb fun, just drop it down to easy. The idea of losing body parts is also used to complete some puzzles in the game, so it's not without its charm. My biggest issue with the game when I played it a few years ago was the frame rate. It's not the most stable game on the system, and back when it was a couple of pounds, I would have urged people to pick it up as a bit of an oddity. When I wrote this, it would have set you back £35 in CEX, but at the time of recording this voiceover, it's dropped to 22. But these prices change daily, and when their stock gets low, it will be back up there, I guarantee. Sadly, even at 22, that's a bit of a harder sell than a couple of pounds if you're not looking to be collecting the full library. The case has got some nice artwork though, and it looks good on the shelf. Sadly, it's another one not to receive the backwards compatibility treatment. Here's the first one on the list to really ramp up the price. Magna Carta 2 will set you back a whopping £68 with a manual, or £105 mint currently at CEX. It's a bit of a different story though from most of the other games on the list. This has always kept some kind of value. To my knowledge, at its lowest, it's never really dropped lower than anything in the mid-20s. It may hold some value as it's a 360 exclusive RPG, which wasn't given the backwards compatibility treatment. I don't think it sold too well either, as it got very middling reviews. But I'm going to have to say, I thought it would have been flying off the shelves if you've seen the cover of it. Something on it just seems to stand out and appeal to people, and I just can't put my finger on it. The combat in the game is a weird mix of real-time and turn-based strategy. You're free to attack enemies, but you need to keep an eye on your attack gauge to stop the characters from overheating. This is where the strategy comes in. All the enemies are visible in the world, so it's not random battles here, but you do go into a sort of combat stance when you attack. These can be activated and deactivated at will with no loading if you need to flee. It is odd that this one stayed a 360 exclusive, as the games which came before it were released on Windows and the PS2. What I played at this I quite enjoyed myself, but I can't imagine it getting a bit stale. This is the second of the two classic RPGs I started on the 360 that I never saw to the end. The other being Infinite Undiscovery, which we spoke about earlier, but I will say this seems like the better game of the two, and a much better game at that. Bullet Witch is a game I have a bit of a history with. Back when the 360 launched, I didn't have many games to play. My mate Alan and I would spend all day and most evenings just playing through everything we could get our hands on. I can't remember if he randomly showed up with Bullet Witch, or if he bought it when we were digging through the local rental place. But anyway, it was in our possession, and fired it up. The game was terrible, but it had a weird charm. It's so broken you can hide round corners and still hit enemies as long as your reticule is in the vicinity. This comes in handy for the higher difficulties in the game though. If I remember correctly, the achievements don't stack for difficulties either. Not that it matters anyway, you need to work your way up through the difficulties to get one of the cruelest achievements on the Xbox 360. Beat the game on Hell difficulty, and for all your trouble, you're only awarded 1G. That's right, it is possible to leave this game sitting at 999 gamerscore. This is a pure Kosoge game, a game that's so bad it's enjoyable. Even though it's pure jank, it does include a lot of destructible scenery, which by today's standards just looks like the buildings sinking into the ground, but you could use the debris to create extra cover. You know, that cover you can shoot through. If I remember rightly, you can also throw the debris back as a weapon. Sadly, every enemy is a complete bullet sponge, and it doesn't seem to matter where you hit them. But even with all its faults, if it was at the price it sat at for years, which was around £2, I would have implored people to pick it up. Sadly these days, the game will run you around $42 for a complete copy, and no matter how much fun I had with the game, it's another one I can't recommend unless you're just on the collecting journey. It's a shame when these silly little budget titles end up going up in price. On console, it's also an Xbox 360 exclusive, but strangely it's not backwards compatible. But if these titles are your kind of thing, it's still very cheap on Steam. It gives me the same kind of vibes as the Earth Defense Force games. If you enjoy them, you might have some fun with this. Margin and the Forsaken Kingdom isn't a game you hear spoke about all that much. At its core, it's a puzzle platformer where you play as a thief who is joined by the Margin, a large fumbling beast who unfortunately will start to get on your nerves with his dopey demeanour. After the two of you pair up, you set about on your adventure to rid the world of darkness and return it to its former glory. Personally, I didn't mind the game, but I never finished it, as when I initially played it, it was through the rental service Love Film, and I started to feel bad that I'd had it too long and needed to send it back. I do have it in the collection now, so I do plan on going back to it one day. I will have to note though, for a 360 game that no one talks about, it's a rather pretty one to play, and if you saw it in a shop, the artwork would definitely pique the interest of anyone looking for something different. If you were to play for long periods of time, you would find moving the Margin about with the on-screen commands grating, and the repetitive combat a bit too much, but in short bursts it can be a fun little title. The biggest problem these days is that it will set you back £45 in CEX for a complete copy. You'll also find it hard to shake the feeling that it plays a bit like a budget version of The Last Guardian. You would have expected this one to be in the backwards compatible library, being its own IP and a Bandai Namco game, but for some reason it was never added. I guess it just didn't have a large enough audience. But a lot of Bandai Namco games were made backwards compatible. It's a shame they left this one out. Arc System Works, the people behind such fighting games as the Guilty Gear series and Blaze Blue? I never know how it's pronounced, released this rather forgettable fighter back in 2009. 2008 if you're in the States though, and even earlier in Japan. It's based off an arcade game of the same name. It goes for a bit of an RPG looking aesthetic, but I just thought all the characters were a bit bland and not memorable. It was a game I picked up when the local game store was shutting down for around 50p, and when I popped it in the console, I was happy I hadn't paid any higher. It is a game with its fans though, and if you're into fighters, you would get some enjoyment out of this. But as I've said before, it's not my genre, but it's on this list due to its current value. I feel this game would have been more fondly remembered if they had gone with the 2D fighter style Arc System Works are known for, but they opted for 3D models and it makes it just look a bit more budget than it actually is. Moral of the story is 2D always ages better than 3D. A complete copy in CEX will now run you £50, and as a theme it seems to be as these games get pricier, they also aren't included in the backwards compatible list. I'm starting to think if they had worked more games into the backwards compatibility program, we wouldn't have been in the predicament we are now with the rising Xbox 360 prices. I say rising, most of these have dropped. Even this has. It was 55 at the original time of writing. The cheapest way to describe Fatal Inertia is a Wipeout clone. You know, fast, futuristic racing and low hovering spaceships. Where this differs is it goes for more natural environments rather than the mostly straightforward tracks Wipeout is known for. Don't worry, I know in the later games you do get to leave the tracks a bit. Again, it's another budget release, but this time it's actually pretty fun. Well, if you like arcadey space racers it is. It's got the usual Mario Kart style power-ups during races such as projectiles and speed boosts, but I found these didn't do too much to help you if you're hit by anything. Taking any damage from the opponents really will ruin your race. Since the game isn't set on walled-in tracks, you have to pass checkpoints to make up the layout of the course. It's not like open world or anything, but you can stray a decent way away from the intended route if you're not paying attention. Some of the ways the game wants you to go though is through some rather tight caves, and these can get tough to get through since it's not a slow game, but when you have the courses down you shouldn't have too many issues. My biggest problem with this was the difficulty curve. It's not too many races in before it gets whacked up to what would be the highest difficulty on other games of this ilk. Fatal Inertia also contains upgrades you can make to your ship to improve their performance and change their overall look. Going for the upgrades is the only way you'll actually make any progress, so sometimes you need to ruin the look of your ride to get ahead. One good thing for achievement hunters is that the online achievements for this can be earned on your own in private lobbies, but it does populate the game with super hard AI. But if you can finish the single player, you should be all good against these bots. This used to be a super cheap title, but again it has taken a drastic rise in price over the recent months. A complete copy of the game will now run you £60 in CEX. And as you can guess, this is most likely due to the fact of, say it with me now, it not being backwards compatible. El Shaddai, or El Shaddadi if you're Big Game Owl, is a game based on the Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish apocalyptic text, so if heavy religious themes aren't your thing, this might not be one for you. But if you do delve on in, it's a pretty unique game. It mixes a number of gameplay styles together, mostly 3D action and 2D platforming, but it happily adds in a dose of racing even and more. What you will notice first is the striking art design the game takes, which along with the gameplay styles, does change from time to time. The combat will also feel somewhat similar if you're into games like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta. Even if the subject matter of the game isn't for you, it's still just strange enough to keep the attention of the players I've spoken to. Sadly not mine, as I haven't finished it yet. But that again is down to me just being bad at this genre of games, but it's up there as one of the more unique games on the system, so I'd actually recommend giving it a go. It might be for you. I am actually currently about to start playing through it again for our Club 52, so by the time this goes out, if I ever finish it, I probably should have actually completed this game by then. When I first started writing this script and I had my Iceberg games in place, this game was sitting over the £30 mark, but it's currently dropped down to closer to 25. This might be down to more people now playing the re-release that came out on the Nintendo Switch. I have left it in this tier though, just as a reminder that game prices are not set in stone on this game collecting journey. Just because you spent big on something thinking it would only increase in price, they can come tumbling back down. Not that this has fallen a long way, yet. If this does crawl its way back up to over 30 before the video comes out, I'll make sure I make a note of it. JASF, or Jane's Advanced Strike Fighters, is an arcade jet fighter game. It's apparently a reboot of a series which was on the PC, but that was more of a sim game. This isn't one I've put a lot of time into as I found it rather dull. It's got that, if you've played one game like this, you've played them all kind of feel to it. Unlike something like Ace Combat, which goes for an over-the-top spectacle approach to aerial combat, JASF feels like a watered-down Tom Clancy's Hawks, with a bit more of an arcade-like spin. Again, this is a genre I've never really had any love for. I find most of them feel like you're moving too slow, and I seem to get caught in never-ending dogfights and just going around in circles. I prefer something more on rails like Star Fox or Panzer Dragoon in my flight games. There are flight sticks available for the Xbox 360, and this is one of the games that supports them, so this might actually add another layer of fun to the game. I've never actually used or owned any of the 360 flight sticks, so I can't comment on their build quality, or even give a recommendation either. This one's on the list simply because this mediocre experience will set you back £32 in CEX. And here it comes again, this one's not backwards compatible. This is the first time in this iceberg I'm going to mention two games in a franchise, and they both hit the criteria for this tier. The Fist of the North Star, Ken's Rage games, are Musou games, in the vein of the Dynasty Warriors franchise, which you probably should expect as they're published by Koei Tecmo, who also put out the Dynasty Warriors franchise. These are based on a long-running manga. Unfortunately, that's where my Fist of the North Star knowledge ends, but there has been many games on this property in the past, usually just in Japan, and then they get a reskin for Europe and the States as something else. The franchise is still getting releases up until as recently as the PS4. You will spend both games running around large environments punching wave after wave of enemies until they pop into a cloud of blood. This is explained as something to do with hitting pressure points on their bodies which cause them to explode, so typical anime stuff. To be honest, the game is pretty fun and does include some skill tree mechanics to break up the repetitive gameplay. Apparently the second game is worse than the first, but to me they're pretty much identical. The first game is significantly easier to come by in the UK and pops up in CEX quite often, but it's still going to run you around £45. The sequel though is a different beast. This is listed on the CEX website as £85 and it's never in stock. I imagine they will do their usual trickery when it comes in next, and they will start to hike the price up more in line with eBay. Recent sold listings online are showing north of the £100 mark for a PAL copy with the English text on the back, so if you do see this one in CEX, snag it for the collection quickly. At this point, I'm just going to let you guess whether these are backwards compatible, since they're based on a licensed property. And we're back to another game that most people ignored on release. Of Orcs and Men is a rather short 15 to 20 hour RPG, where you play as the orcs known as the Greenskins. It's pretty much a typical fantasy RPG, but the combat is a little strange. You can stealth about and pick off as many enemies as you can, but when you get into a full on battle, everything slows down to more of a turn-based affair, where you pick the attacks that both your characters will perform. The stealth action is a bit janky, but it clearly must have been what people enjoyed, as the 2 follow-up games in this series are the Styx games released on Xbox One, and they go all in on the stealth. I have heard good things about these follow-ups, but I haven't given them much time. Strangely, I've heard a good number of people who've played this said they had a good time with it as well. I myself only dabbled, but it seemed enjoyable. Again, this was quite a cheap game, sitting under £10, but recently it's jumped up to roughly £30 these days, give or take a couple of quid. It fluctuates above and below 30 all the time in CEX. But what makes this one a bit of an outlier is the fact it's also backwards compatible. How this happened and why it keeps its value, I cannot explain. It must have just had a smaller release. It's also still available digitally. Maybe the price of the physical is due to the success of the later games in the series. Not that they're like Game of the Year contenders or anything though. Right, that's another tier in the bag. Up next we're going to talk about games that don't really have any redeeming qualities, a price tag that just can't be justified, or just meme status. If you're seeking out this next bunch, you're doing it for collecting purposes only. Have you ever wanted a game that mixes real-time strategy and a first-person shooter together in a very low-budget janky package? Well, Raven Squad, or Raven Squad Operation Hidden Dagger to give it its full name, is the game for you. Don't let the claims of Best of E3 on the front of the case fool you. If you spend your money on this one, the enjoyment will be rather lacking. You can jump between the 2 perspectives of FPS and RTS on the fly, and the transition is pretty smooth. But you don't control a large number of units at once, so it's not as impressive as it sounds. Imagine being able to jump between top-down and first person in cannon fodder. That's what it reminds me of. The entire game from memory takes place in a jungle environment, which makes the levels very samey. It is a great concept for a game, but the execution just isn't there. Was there once a Command and Conquer game that did this as well? I can't remember. When it comes to the console scene, this was exclusive to the Xbox 360. It does have a PC version though, and I can imagine that runs way better, but I doubt enough to make it a recommendation to play. The only positives that I can give this is that it survived the price hikes sitting at just £5 in CEX, and the achievements aren't overall that difficult. I have yet to go back and get them all though, as I just found it boring more than anything else. The game is entirely co-op though, so if you want to drag a friend through this turd, feel free. But I think you'd owe them a beer, or several. This is yet another one you'd have to crack out the actual console for though, as it's not backwards compatible. Before we get into the section solely on imports, which is subjective anyway depending on your location, let's talk about the well-known and pretty awful American exclusive Burger King games. To be exact, 3 Burger King games, which are Big Bumpin', Sneak King, and Pocket Bike Racer. Big Bumpin' is a simple bumper cars / dodgems game. It plays like it would have worked well as a minigame within something like Fusion Frenzy. It contains a few different modes, but the most interesting is using the bumper cars to play a large game of air hockey. This is actually the best received of the 3 games. Sneak King is a very weird stealth game, where you tiptoe about 4 maps slowly as the Burger King mascot, and surprise unsuspecting victims with Burger King food. Yeah, I don't know how they came up with this one. But to make it even more strange, there's a guy on the internet who's trying to collect all copies of this game in existence. He also has a YouTube channel called Sneak Kings, where he documents his journey, but this was started a few years ago and I'm not sure if he's still actively hunting them or not. Finally, there's Pocket Bike Racer. This is just a very simple Mario Kart style racer, but on bikes instead of carts. But it does let you play as someone dressed as a hamburger, so that's kind of fun I guess. But the game itself is very bland and not too long. To my knowledge, these 3 games are the only ones on the 360 which are also compatible with the original Xbox as well. These are not backwards compatible with the newer systems or region free however. Price wise you'll be looking at about £20 each if you can't find them already in the UK. After postage and import that is. But yeah, that might be higher now. If you're in the US though, you're in luck. These don't cost much more than they originally did from Burger King itself, which was around $3.99. I imagine they're filling up bargain bins all around the retro stores. Truck Racer feels like the kind of budget game you'd find back in the day on the PS1, not on the Xbox 360. Come to think of it, I recently played a game on the PS1 called Truck Racing, and that was a better game. What this boils down to is an arcade truck racing game with a minimal amount of game modes, somehow twitchy but heavy physics, and some pretty poor graphics. Even with its subpar presentation, you will routinely find that the frame rate struggles and stutters. I also found when you used the boost button, it would be really inconsistent with the handling, and would more often spin me out for no reason. But you don't really need to worry about it, the game is incredibly easy. This is its only saving grace, as yet again it's a good one for achievement hunters. You will need to grab a partner though to get the required 25 online races played. I wouldn't even attempt to find a game without someone else helping. The online has always been dead, and I was playing this back when it was relatively new. The only thing you need to keep an eye on is the damage to your truck in the races, as if you get totaled, it can cost you the race. But most of the time you'll be too far out in front to worry about the other racers anyway. For the longest time, this used to be quite a pricey one here in the UK. I believe this to be because it was released in mainland Europe first, so these were the only copies floating about. Luckily now it's quite easily available online. CEX did have it drop down to the lowest I'd ever seen it of just £4, but it's back up to £8 now unfortunately. Still not going to break the bank though, is it? Be aware though that since a lot of people imported this originally, you'll find quite a lot of copies without the English text on the box, but these do still play in English. As you've also probably guessed, this is not one that Microsoft bothered to put any time into, and it was skipped when it came to the backwards compatibility program. This one might be a bit divisive in this category, as it has its fans, but not many. The game itself looks like Splinter Cell with vampires, which it kind of is. You have the same kind of stealthing about, with things like different vision modes, but unlike Splinter Cell, you aren't some badass jumping out of the shadows to swiftly disappear again. This is more survival horror. Ammo is limited, and it's almost useless against most of the vampires. You need to make your shots count, and only use them when you have to. You should spend the rest of the time trying to avoid conflict at all costs. If you're spotted, it's pretty much game over. You're not outrunning them to go hide again. They are relentless, and they'll kill you in 1 or 2 hits. This is where the game falls flat. This almost instant death with very limited checkpoints just makes the game frustrating. You are free to tackle each level however you want to complete your objectives, but I found there to be only one real way for each level, and if you haven't worked out what the game is expecting you to do, you'll pay the price. Luckily, if you're interested in this or are going for a full set of the horror games on the system, this is still nice and cheap. It's currently only £8 in CEX. It did get a slightly enhanced port for the PS3, which goes by the name Vampire Reign Altered Species, which for some reason is £42. At 8 it's a curiosity, at 42 that'd be a hard pass. As the trend continues in this category, this again isn't backwards compatible, and it's an annoying one for achievement hunters, as 650G of the game's 1000 gamerscore is tied to its multiplayer mode. Also there's achievements tied to killing a lot of vampires, in a game where you really should be avoiding them. Luckily there is a cheap method to obtain this, but it's still an odd choice of achievement. Just remember, if you pick this one up, I warned you, you may not be in the minority who actually enjoy it. World of Outlaws is a game that I remember playing as the front cover looked really cool, and I thought, it's a racer, how bad can it be? Well, it's up there as maybe one of the worst racers on the system. For starters, I didn't actually know this was based on a real sport, and even worse, I didn't know that it was basically NASCAR on dirt. What I mean is it's driving in circles, but this time on mud, in real life Hot Wheels cars. That premise could have actually been a fun game, but the handling for this is all over the place. It's really super inconsistent. Some races you will win with ease and you feel like you're playing with arcade handling. Then the same car in the next event is dialed up to full sim with no assists. I understand it's down to different parts which get swapped out, but I never felt like I had any real control over the customization of the car. But it is one I fought through to see the 1000G on, which also included playing a lot of online. This one could be down to me not knowing how to play the game properly, but other people I have spoken to have also had the same issues I did. If you're not a massive fan of the sport and a bit of a masochist, I'd give this one a wide berth. This one's not cheap either, it'll run you a painful £32 in CEX. But just be glad it's not the PS3 version, that's sitting at 75. Old Faithful will have to come out again if you're brave enough to play this, as yet again, this one wasn't considered for the backwards compatibility program. If there's any racer on this system to avoid, I genuinely believe it's this one. Some things in this life do not need a gritty reboot, and the cute Bomberman series most definitely wasn't one of them, but for some weird reason it happened, and it remains an Xbox 360 exclusive too. Bomberman Act Zero just about works as a Bomberman game, but its sci-fi robot look is just incredibly ugly, and if you're going to go for a completion on it, you're going to be staring at the same brown screens for upwards of 1,000 hours. If you don't know of Bomberman, it's usually a top-down cutesy game where players drop bombs in a maze in order to blow up blocks and take out other players, all while trying not to get blown up yourself. It's a very simple concept. This is all you do in this game too, but strangely the game only gives you 1 life in its campaign and challenges you to beat 99 levels with no save function. So set aside a couple of days for this where you don't mind leaving your Xbox on. Just imagine going for this and you die in the 98th level, just to start all over again. That's torture. If this is for you though, there is also FPB mode. This plays the same, but the camera is really zoomed in, which means you can't see much of the maze, so keeping track of the other players is a bit of a nightmare. Why this is even an option in a frantic maze game makes no sense to me. Strangely, this legendary couch multiplayer game only has Xbox Live support, and you're not going to be finding anyone else playing this. Not when it came out, and especially not now. So yeah, without friends who are willing to go through hell with you online, the actual game is super bare bones. This is one for the pure hardcore with no life, and if you want to see the end of this game, you're going to have to live it. The AI are also so unfair, the game is almost impossible. What's worse is if you actually want to play this pile of crap, it will cost you £15 in CEX these days. That's actually 10 down from what it was when I wrote this. This isn't backwards compatible either. As much as I wish all games were, this isn't one that's going to be missed. A Train HX was released in Japan and Europe only, to some pretty bad reviews, with one outlet describing it as a train wreck of a game, which is apt when it's a railroad simulator. Well, that's what you think it's going to be, laying some tracks and playing with trains. But it's actually more of a business management sim, and way too complicated for its own right. It might actually not be that complicated, but when it comes to anything with numbers, or the word business, my mind just shuts down and I become a toddler. I was hoping I could jump straight into this one and fumble through it a bit like SimCity, as that is well designed and doesn't take long to work out what you should be doing, and you actually start to have fun. With this, you'll be staring at ugly grey and brown buildings and landscapes wondering what you have to do. Even with its confusing UI and its overall boring nature, it's actually meant to be an easy 1000G. With a walkthrough, of course, but I cannot confirm this as I haven't tried it. It might have to be one I revisit one day, knowing what I'm supposed to be doing, and see if I can find the tiniest bit of entertainment in it. Somehow this is actually part of a very long running series which dates all the way back to the 1980s, and somehow it's even got games released after this one. So there definitely are some hardcore train enthusiasts out there begging for more. I can't knock people for being into trains though. I guess it's better than being into something like crack cocaine. If you're after a copy of this, you're in luck. It's only £12 here in the UK and CEX. It's also not backwards compatible though. I will also stress that one of the main selling points for this game was the large amount of downloadable trains which could be purchased from the Xbox Live Store, but with this shut down now, I imagine it's an even more watered down experience than it could be. This game is about as niche as they come, so I would love to know if anyone watching this has fond memories of playing this one. Fully clothed sex scenes. Let's move on. I joke, but this is what everyone remembers about this game. This is one I've played all the way through, and it's not as bad as people say. That doesn't mean it's good, it's far from it. But I could kinda see the vision. Ride to Hell Retribution was originally going to be a large open world epic about biker gangs, but it had a seriously troubled development. I'd actually never heard of this game until I saw it brand new in Tesco and picked up a copy out of curiosity. The game's a third person linear beat 'em up / shooter with levels breaking up with a bit of bike riding in between. The story has something to do with revenge after your brother is killed out of nowhere, but you will soon drown the story out if you're trying to get to the end. Let's discuss the driving sections first. The controls are awful. You will not be able to easily get around the corners, and you don't have much actual control as it sort of feels like an auto runner. You will from time to time get into road rash looking fights with other bikers. I say looking as they will just ride up alongside you, and you will have to perform quick time events to take them down, which if you're not quick enough, you will find these will make you drive straight into obstacles and fail. You may also beat the enemy and just still be locked into that position due to the game being a very buggy mess, causing another fail. Other than that, you have to slide the bike under things which will only work about 70% of the time. This is the same for every driving section. The combat is part cover shooter, part brawler. Most of the first part of the game you'll be using very weakly inspired Arkham combat to punch and dodge, with even more quick time moments thrown in. This might be the part of the game that works the best though. When you get into the shooting, every enemy is a bullet sponge until you shoot them in the head, which is surprisingly easy, as the enemies literally walk to you in a straight line, with your gun at head height most of the time. Where the game gets difficult is where they throw these hockey mask wearing enemies that look a little bit like Jason Voorhees at you. They just don't die, even with headshots, and on higher difficulties they will kill you instantly. I stopped playing on hard as I got to a part where I needed to activate a lift, but I had a few of these guys chasing me while being gunned down from all angles. On this difficulty it's about 2 hits and you're dead, and the game just wants you to stand out in the open in this barrage of fire. This is the hardest part on lower difficulties too, but on hard it's almost impossible. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of things you do in the game reward you with awkward, fully clothed sex scenes. Why? I don't know, but this is where you will realise how big the protagonist Jake's hands are. I have heard this weird some people out, but I think they were going for a bit more of a Double Fine Brutal Legend stylised kind of look, but just couldn't pull it off. Maybe that's why they're fully clothed. You can't get the bras undone with the bigger hands. This is one I would tell everyone to avoid, unless like me, when you're told something is bad, you need to find out how bad it is. Oh, and one more weird glitch I found with the game was that if I pressed anything on the controller during the loading screens, the game would freeze. I had to put the controller down on the floor every time and wait until the press A or whatever it was to continue popped up. So I spent a large amount of time going back to the dashboard to reload the game as I kept forgetting. This one again isn't backwards compatible, and it will only cost you £5 in CEX if you want to put yourself through the pain of this one for the morbid curiosity. Who asked for this one? I really don't know. Hail to the Chimp is an American exclusive party game where you play as animals trying to collect the most clams to win an election to become the president. You'll quickly find that the game doesn't do much to explain the minigames, and that it's incredibly easy to lose which player you are, or to not realise you're currently hidden behind some scenery. Between the minigames there are sections which are inspired by all types of American TV tropes such as talk shows, interviews and the news, but I didn't put the game on this part of this list due to its weird premise. It's on here due to one very strange quirk the game has. You see, there are a couple of achievements on this game which can be only described as nightmarish. Basically, these are for completing all of a single player game without losing a single minigame in any of the tournaments, which the game calls primaries. Winning everything in a hectic party game sounds hard enough, but with practice you could get this down. But there is a curveball. If you play this game while connected to Xbox Live, and you fail and the game saves, you're locked out of the achievements. Forever. What you have to do is either turn off the Xbox or dashboard as soon as you fail before it saves, which will be a lot in this type of game. If you're not worried about achievements, you could still have a bit of fun with this wacky party game, but for achievement hunters, this might be the end level boss of frustration. To import a copy to the UK, you're only looking at around £20. Online sources says it was released in the UK, but this is a lie. It's also not backwards compatible or region free. I would love to know if somebody's beat this. Like the last video where I spoke about Seekers of Doolin, World of Tanks is just one for set completionists at this point. It was an online-only tank battling game made by wargaming.net, which was actually really popular and is still playable to this day on modern systems. From my knowledge, and a very quick Google, the only console physical of this game that was ever released was on the Xbox 360. Newer versions of the game are free to play, so no physical was ever printed. So at this point, this game is an unplayable coaster, but at least the cover looks alright on the shelf. This is one I never got around to playing, but war simulations aren't really my thing. When I wrote this, CEX was still stocking this, and it was about £4, but it looks like they have actually removed it from their system. It's still possible to find copies of it on eBay, and they'll run you between £7 and £10, so it's not pricey yet. I wonder if when CEX were still stocking it, if they would tell people at the point of sale that they were just buying a pointless bit of plastic. My guess is no, since they still seem to be stocking the crew. So yeah, this seems like the perfect one to end this section on, as it does really make you wonder, why would someone be buying this in 2025? Up next, we'll be talking about a few more imports, which might run you a pretty penny. As stated, by imports, it will be depending on where you are located, as most of these were not released in the PAL territory, but some of them never left Japan. Here I go, trying to explain a genre I know very little about again, but Golden Fantasia X, which I also believe is known as Ugon Muso Kyoku X, is a 2D anime-style tag battle fighting game based on a visual novel series. I have no prior knowledge of this franchise, but its name, Umineko, When the Seagulls Cry, is just a strange title to me. It seems like the visual novels are all based around murder mysteries on an island. It's starting to remind me of Danganronpa. Anyway, how does the game play? Like many others of this style of game, of course, your characters share a health bar, but you can tag in and out when you need to. There is some kind of meta world you can activate to perform special moves and cancel attacks, but this is as far as my knowledge goes. It's not one I've played or owned, but you just never hear anyone talking about it. It has a very colourful art design and looks like anyone who has exhausted most of the 2D fighters over here could have a good time with it. I'm just no good at selling these types of games, but someone needs to talk about them. I'd check out a review if you're interested before purchasing this one though, as it will cost you around £70 to import to the UK. Sadly it's not region free, so you're going to need an NTSC-J console to play this one. Through legitimate means anyway. In the last video I included a random bit of footage from a game, and got a good few comments asking what it was. Well, it was Operation Darkness, a strategy RPG set in World War II, with a bit of a spin. It also contains werewolves and vampires, with of course the vampires taking up the side of the Nazis, who command an army of Nazi zombies. You know when you saw Atlas on the front of the box, you knew it wasn't going to be a straightforward war game. Being a strategy RPG, it's played out on a grid-based playing field, but it is entirely in 3D. I mentioned that it is 3D, as apparently this causes the camera to be a nightmare to control. It is also known to be brutally difficult and contains the usual tropes of this genre, such as permadeath. This is one I've always wanted to play, but sadly it never came out in the UK. It was only released in America and Japan. Again, seeing Atlas on the case will also tell you this isn't going to be a cheap one to add to your collection. Since the store shut down, this has jumped all over the place in price. A Japanese copy will set you back around £50 or £60 to import, but the game is very text heavy, so unless you know the language, this might cause some issues. If you need it to be English, you're going to have to import one from the States. Here you're looking around about £150 for a semi-decent copy, but if you're after one in mint condition, you're looking more north of £200. I will pick this one up one day, but I'm going to have to start saving if I want it anytime soon. Sadly, this one is region locked, and yet again, it's not backwards compatible. For anyone watching in America, this is one you might be familiar with, although I can't imagine it was one the masses were running out to play. We spoke about Secret Service earlier in the video, and how it feels like Activision were pumping out anything they could with an early version of the COD engine. Well, this is the other one, but this time you're fighting dinosaurs. Jurassic the Hunted is as budget as they come, from the box art to the graphics, But like Secret Service, there is some fun to be had here. It's not an overly long game, but mowing down raptors and having big boss fights with the T-Rex is what I wanted from gaming as a child. For some reason, the game has some weird time-travelling mechanic, and the dinosaurs pop in with these vortexes, but it contains the same usual weirdness you would get from a B-movie to explain why there are giant lizards everywhere. From time to time you have to hold areas which play a little bit like zombies in Call of Duty, where you'll be reboarding windows to stop dinosaurs breaking in, but nothing in this game is difficult. Do not expect a stable frame rate either, it will chop and tear all the time. You also have a slow motion ability at your disposal, but I found the frame rate dropping worked better than this for slowing down the gameplay. This was released on everything at the time, these being the Wii, the PS3 and the 360. But for some bizarre reason, it got a PS2 release too. With this only coming out in the States, it is region locked to NTSC consoles. Well, the internet says it is. I do own this, so if anyone wants me to test this on either a Japanese or European machine, let me know. If you're looking to import this one to the UK, you're looking somewhere between 30 and 50, which doesn't sound too bad until you find out the game is only around 2 hours long. I honestly had a good time with this one, but I'm a bit of a weirdo, so I can't really give it a recommendation. Oh, and I almost forgot, it's not backwards compatible. Why Tetris got a Japanese-only Xbox 360 release is something that's always baffled me. I know these kind of games are really popular in Asian regions, but it's not like something that would have been difficult to translate and release worldwide. But this version of Tetris is based on the Japanese-only arcade version of Tetris. It was also a launch game for the console in Japan. The whole goal of the game is to reach the level of Grandmaster, which I believe is getting to level 999, so get good at Tetris. I absolutely love Tetris and I have this in my collection, but I'm still yet to actually play it. And I can't tell you why. Might have something to do with Tetris Effect coming into my life, which if you have that, you don't really need any more Tetris. The Grandmaster Ace games are known to be strict on the controls. I'm not sure if this is the case why this is technically a spin-off to the series. I really should have played this before writing this, but too many games, too little time. I just wanted to mention it was strange that the 360 had a Japanese exclusive Tetris game. Yet again, this one isn't region free or backwards compatible, but it is one of the cheaper exclusive games to import from Japan, with a copy easily being found between £20 and £30. Strangely, in 2024, older games in the series were released on the Nintendo Switch. Cold Sept Saga? Cold Kept Saga? I don't know how this one's pronounced. I'll stick with Cold Sept Saga. It's another one that only came out in America and Japan, but this time it's a monster summoning card-based board game of sorts. You roll a dice and move around the board taking squares a bit like Monopoly, but you use monsters to guard the spaces. When you land on a space with someone else's monster, you have to battle them for the space. Rinse and repeat until you make it back to the beginning square with enough magic. Well, that's how it sounds like you play it, as it's one I've never imported. It is one I wouldn't mind picking up though, as the girlfriend really loves board games. Me, not so much, but I'd happily play it with her. Looking online, it does seem that a large part of the game is luck-based, but there are strategies in place to try and swing the RNG nature in your favour. This was actually released to mostly positive reviews, so it makes it even stranger that this never made it to Europe. For achievement hunters, it's good to note that you can stack this and the Japanese game for 2000 gamerscore, though it's not backwards compatible or region free. Just like Operation Darkness, the Japanese version of this game is way cheaper than its American counterpart. You can get a copy from Japan for as low as $40, but the American release will set you back anywhere up to about £150. So it's only one for people in the power regions really wanting to go for that worldwide set. Like most things this far down, Darkest of Days is a weird one. It's yet again another very low budget first person shooter with a gimmick. This time you're hired by a time travelling organisation to try and locate a scientist. So you spend the time hopping through different time periods. But this isn't the main gimmick of the game. Its biggest selling point was being able to use different weapons from different time periods in the incorrect time. For example, you get to mow down people with futuristic weaponry during the American Civil War. Sadly, this mechanic isn't used as much in the game as I would have liked, as this would have made it super easy. This is one that I imported a long time ago and beat, mainly because I wanted the horse puncher achievement on my gamertag. This is where you have to punch a horse in the face and kill it outright with one blow. Yeah, this game's really weird. As with all the other budget FPS games on this list, expect all the usual stuff, such as bad frame rates, screen tearing, bad controls and plenty of crashes. But I would recommend it to anyone who's looking to play something way different than anything else on the console, or any console that I can think of. Again, this isn't backwards compatible or region free, and for some reason it only came out in America. It might have something to do with the American Civil War inclusion, I don't know. I believe the only way to play this game now is with a physical version on the Xbox 360, as it was removed from Steam, but even with this in mind it will only run you about 50 to 60 to import to the UK, but unlike Jurassic the Hunted, you won't have this one done in 2 hours. Here is another one that I actually own and have played. Jimmy Johnson's Anything with an Engine is a straight up kart racer, with, you guessed it, a gimmick. Here you play as characters who have strapped engines to anything to make vehicles. This includes things such as bathtubs or living room chairs. You can tell it's had some inspiration from the greats of the genre such as Mario Kart, but I guess it stayed within the States due to the inclusion of the Jimmy Johnson name. I had to look up who he even was, but I took a stab in the dark that he was some NASCAR driver, and I was right. The thing you may be shocked to hear though is the game is actually pretty solid and a good bit of fun. I remember it having a pretty steep difficulty curve though, especially for a kart racer. To top it all off, the game was strangely published by Konami of all people. I'm getting tired of saying it now, but this game is not backwards compatible, and it's region locked to its homeland of America. Luckily it's not a pricey one though, you can usually pick it up rather easily for around £20 to the UK. It's also one I've seen about in the UK quite a bit. This is one I think would have done pretty well here, but with the inclusion of a celebrity most people outside of the US have never heard of, is most likely what got it stuck in one region. And for the final one of the list today, we're going back to the realms of tactical RPGs released by Atlas in only Japan and the States. Again, why skip Europe? I don't know. This is mostly compared to the Fire Emblem or Suikoden franchises, but apparently it's not to the same levels of polish or fun. It has something to do with a war in a place called Neverland, but from what I've heard the story's a bit on the dull side. So yet again, it's a turn-based tile grid tactical RPG. This is where my knowledge of the game falls off, as it never came out here and I'm still yet to pick up a copy. When the 360 store shut down, this was another one that was going for some silly money, but it has died down a bit now. It's not going to cost you nothing, but in a strange twist of events, the Japanese copy is selling for around 70 and the US copy is sitting around 60. Again, it's not region free or backwards compatible, so you will require the correct hardware to play it outside of the US or Japan. Being an English speaker, I imagine it makes more sense to go with the American release if you're going for the worldwide set. Sorry the last few of these haven't been super in depth, but I haven't had a chance to play them all, and hopefully one day I'll get my hands on them. So there we have it, another dive into the Xbox 360 library. I would love to say I'd put another one of these videos together, and there really is enough games out there to do it. But I thought with this one I was stretching it a little to fit it into an iceberg format. Unlike the original video where there was some almost unobtainable stuff towards the bottom tier, this was more just what people might not have heard of. I think I will continue this series working on showing off games for the 360 library, since it's my favourite system of all time, but it will most likely be in the form of showing off 10 games people may not be aware of at a time. This means I'll be able to get these out quicker too. As with a full-time job and many other little commitments, putting together videos of this length really takes me a long time. This has been in the works since not long after the other video was released. But with all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe you found out about some new games to play. If you like what you saw, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, you know, that stuff. I do put out videos semi-regularly. They're all gaming related but in different formats, from pickups to reviews to even gaming challenges. It's just more of a I make what I feel like at the moment kind of channel, which I know isn't for everyone, but you never know, there might be something else you might like, especially if you're looking for obscure and rare video games. With that said, thanks again,